time for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute? Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's at Drive Time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
Hello, good afternoon and welcome to GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. I'm Nana Akua. And for the next 3 hours, me and my panel will be taking on some of the big topics hitting the headlines right now. This show is all about opinion. It's mine, it's theirs, and of course it's yours. We'll be debating, discussing, and at times we will disagree, but no one will be cancelled. Joining me in an hour's time, we've got broadcaster and journalist Danny Kelly, and also broadcaster and author Christine Hamilton. In a few moments' time, we'll be going head-to-head in a clash of minds with Deputy Leader of Reform Party Ben Habib and also the former Minister for Europe Denis McShane. But before we get started, let's get your latest news with Tatiana.
Anna, thank you very much and good afternoon. It's 3 o'clock. This is the latest from the GB Newsroom. The King has led the nation observing a 2-minute silence on Remembrance Day, honouring fallen soldiers. The Prince of Wales was among the senior royals to stand behind King Charles, with the monarch wearing the uniform of the Marshal of the Royal Air Force. He then laid a wreath similar to the one produced for King George VI. The Prime Minister, Labour leader and former PMs were also at the Cenotaph in central London, joined by other senior politicians and dignitaries. The Met Police says it's actively investigating possible cases of hate crime following yesterday's Armistice Day disorder. Hundreds of thousands of pro-Palestinian protesters marched through central London, which led to pockets of violence. 9 officers were injured, 126 people arrested, including 92 right-wing counter-protesters. The force released images of people it would like to speak to after they were pictured carrying anti-Semitic placards. British Transport Police is also investigating a racially aggravated altercation at London Waterloo and has released photos of 4 men it's trying to identify. Authorities also want to speak to a woman over an alleged anti-Semitic hate crime at Victoria Station. The Home Secretary, who attended today's service at the Cenotaph, is being blamed for stoking tensions during the pro-Palestinian protests. During the week, Suella Braverman described the demonstrators as hate marchers, as she accused the police of bias for allowing yesterday's rally to go ahead on Remembrance Weekend. Scottish First Minister Humza Yousaf is among the growing chorus of voices calling for her to go.
I'm afraid that the Home Secretary's position, in my view, is untenable. She should, in fact, not even be allowed to resign. She should just be sacked by the Prime Minister, because no Home Secretary should be fanning the flames of division, quite the opposite.
Defence Secretary Grant Shapps has defended his cabinet colleague.
Job as Home Secretary is to make sure that, quite properly, that the powers exist and then the powers are then used within the operational independence of the police to make sure that marches and protests are properly policed, and where the laws have been broken, as they clearly have been in some cases, that those prosecutions take place. That is what a Home Secretary is there for. Now, I wouldn't have quite put it in her language. It's not the language I would have used, but the point still stands.
A man has been charged with the murder of a mother who was killed in front of her children in Manchester. Perseverance Nkube was found with a single stab wound to the chest in the early hours of Friday morning. She later died in hospital. 45-year-old Herbert Moyo has also been charged with possession of an offensive weapon. He's due in court tomorrow. Weather warnings have been issued for Northern Ireland, England and parts of Wales as Storm Debbie approaches. The fourth storm of the season, heavy rain and gale-force winds with gusts of up to 80 miles per hour are expected. Earlier this month, Storm Ciarán caused widespread flooding. The Met Office says yellow alerts come into force from 3 o'clock tomorrow morning, ending at 6 o'clock in the evening. And Iceland is preparing for a volcanic eruption after being hit by a series of earthquakes over the last few days. Authorities say there's evidence of magma spreading rapidly underground in the island's southwest. Around 3,000 residents had to evacuate from a nearby town last night. One of the most popular attractions of the island, the Blue Lagoon Spa, has also been forced to close. This is GB News across the UK on TV, in your car on digital radio and on your smart speaker by saying play GB News. Now back to Nana.
Thank you, Tatiana. It's just coming up to 5 minutes after 3 o'clock. This is GB News. We are the People's Channel. I'm Nana Akua. Coming up, I'll be speaking to GB News' reporters across the country as we celebrate Remembrance Sunday. The King led the nation in a 2-minute silence to honour fallen soldiers. King Charles was joined by other members of the royal family, as well as the Prime Minister and dignitaries from the Commonwealth, and he laid a wreath at the Cenotaph in the capital to mark Remembrance Sunday. I'll be asking, as well as we go head-to-head, should the police be granted powers to stop marches? Yesterday, we saw protesters climb a World War I memorial at Wellington Arc as the pro-Palestinian march took place in London on Armistice Day. Is it time for the police to be given more powers to stop these sort of marches going ahead on significant national days? Then, does Italy's migration proposal give the green light for Rwanda? Up to 3,000 migrants a month are expected to pass through a migrant facility in Albania, whilst asylum applications are assessed by officials in Rome. So the question is, does Italy's migration proposal give the green light for the UK's Rwanda plan? Then, with a future Labour government drive away the wealthy, will it do that? Rich Britons are fleeing to the UK, from the UK to places like Florida in fear of the heavy taxes being introduced under a future Starmer-led government. There's reports that a lot of wealthy Britons could be relocating to Florida in the US, which has no income tax or inheritance tax and has one of the largest populations of the British expats. So will a future Labour government drive away the wealthy? And then, are 13 million a year diversity SARs needed in the NHS? The Health Secretary Steve Barclay has told NHS chiefs to stop promoting woke ideology, as up to 13 million is being spent on equality, diversity and inclusion roles all across the trust in the UK. So are £13 million a year diversity SARs needed in the NHS? That's not, they don't get paid that individually, that's collectively. All of that coming up. Tell me what you think as ever on everything we're discussing. Email gbviews@gbnews.com or tweet me at GBNews. Right, so it's time to go head-to-head in a clash of minds. So on the menu, we start with King Charles and other members of the royal family. Before we do that, as well as the Prime Minister and political party leaders, they've said they've laid wreaths at the Cenotaph this morning as part of the Remembrance Sunday commemoration to remember Britain's fallen. Our reporters have been around the country covering the event this morning. So joining me now, let's start with our royal correspondent, Cameron Walker. Cameron, you were at Horses Guard Parade. How was that?
Do you know, it was in complete contrast to the scenes we saw in central London yesterday with the protests and the counter-protests. Yet today was all about camaraderie, solidarity and silent remembrance. And I think the King and the royal family leading those tributes out on Whitehall at the Cenotaph today was really quite poignant, actually. And the close to 10,000 veterans as well who were marching along on the Veterans March past, had royal salutes from Princess Anne, the Princess Royal as well. They were saying to me earlier that it's really good being part of this family of armed service personnel and former armed service personnel who have been through similar experiences and can support each other through the tough times. It was a really kind of sombre but also poignant day for them.
We do pomp and ceremony so well, don't we? I mean, it must have been such a beautiful event as well. I can see Boris Johnson there as well. That hair, unmistakable. He's coming to join us live on GB News. What was your feeling being there? Because obviously we've had this whole Armistice Day. It was overshadowed, in my view, by all of these marches. I'm really pleased to see the focus now squarely on Remembrance Sunday.
Yeah, and I think the focus was very much on Remembrance Sunday. I mean, we had the King Street Royal Horse Artillery fire the guns to start the 2-minute silence, and there was veterans, there was people from all ages. So you had D-Day veterans there, but you also had some young children from a charity called Scotty's Little Soldiers, which supports kids who's lost a parent through armed conflict. So, you know, it really was a mix of people and diverse mix of people on Whitehall, and you just see the scenes there on your screens now. It was silence and it was respectful. Everyone was respectful and just kind of reflecting in the moments, honouring those who fought for our freedoms and for the country we live in today.
Beautiful ceremony. It's so nice to see everyone just standing in silence like that and everything there. Let's go live to Enniskillen and have a chat with Dougie Beattie, who is there. Dougie, what was it like there?
Well, good afternoon, and yes, it was a very sombre occasion here in Enniskillen, but it was also very, very wet indeed. But Enniskillen, of course, holds other scars of Remembrance Day. The Enniskillen bomb going off here in 1987 during the Remembrance Day service that killed 12 and injured 63. So there was many dignitaries here today, including the Secretary of State for Northern Ireland, Chris Heaton-Harris, John Boucher, the new Chief Constable, and rather strangely, but well, in recent years, was the Taoiseach, the Irish Prime Minister, Leo Varadkar. Most people forget that during the First World War, Ireland was as one. It was part of the UK, there was no border here, and not one village in Ireland did not feel a loss of losing a young male in the First World War. And they were very much ignored right up to about the 1990s, when the President of Ireland, Mary Robison, really took it under her wing to try and engage with us and correct that wrong. And ever since then, we have really had a Taoiseach come to Northern Ireland to lay wreaths and to respect the dead, the Irish dead that were lost in the First World War. So quite a day for Enniskillen. The weather wasn't with us, but all in all, a very sombre and respectful day.
Thank you, Dougie. Let's go over live to Birmingham and have a chat with Jack Carson. Jack, what's it been like where you are?
Well, it was a really impeccably attended and also well-respected service as well, particularly those 2 minutes of silence, really poignant as Birmingham, the whole of Birmingham seemed to fall silent at 11 o'clock. The barriers were packed with people that are coming to pay their respects, but also watch, of course, the fantastic military parade that we saw. We saw members of the Fusiliers, of the Army, of the Navy, of the Marine Corps and the Royal Air Force as well, who then all, of course, took the salute from the Lord Lieutenant on the stage as well. But of course, speaking to some of those people as I did earlier, I spoke to Major Noel Hannon of the Royal Corps of Signals and also Alan Evans, who's not only a veteran of the Royal Corps of Signals, but he was also the parade marshal today for the veterans that took the salute as well. Here's what both of them told me a little bit earlier on.
Well, I live in Birmingham now. I've not lived in Birmingham for too long, but you know, it's sort of a very welcoming city. Wherever it is that I am at that point in time, I always come to the Remembrance service. So I've spent Remembrance Sunday in Iraq and Afghanistan over the time I was there. It's a very, very important day for me. Very important to come down here, particularly, you know, what's going on in the world at the moment. You know, you come down here today. There's no politics. There's no protest. It just is what it is. You know, we're just here to remember.
And what for you did you think about during those minutes of silence?
I think about friends who aren't lucky enough to be here, not be able to be with their families and partners today. That's what I was thinking.
I'm fortunate to be the parade marshal, the veterans. My role is to assemble and then march them through in front of the uniformed personnel. Every year is an honour. The actual parade today went really well. A lot of veterans turned up, and even more veterans were in the crowd. Good to see. It was a good parade, all horrible weather, but nobody bothers about the weather when you're marching.
It was such a fantastic sight to see the veterans, particularly when they marched round as part of the parade at the end of the service and took that salute, because Birmingham has such a proud military history. In World War I, more than 8,000 men and boys from this city went over to France and Belgium to fight in the trenches. And of course, when you got to the Second World War, as part of the beating heart of the UK's industry, this was of course heavily bombarded by Nazi bombers as those manufacturing took place in this city and the surrounding areas, of course, to try and help out the troops, of course, trying on the continent. So this place has such a history, of course. The West Midlands in general, was at the Arboretum, of course, yesterday. So all weekend here in the West Midlands, as part of these acts of remembrance, have not only been impeccably well respected and attended, but also those solemn feelings and that humbling feeling, as you heard there from the veterans, particularly that attended this event, have been strong here in the city.
Thank you very much, Jack. And finally, Theo Chukumba, he's national reporter. Theo, where are you?
Yes, well, very good afternoon. So I'm in Chelmsford in Essex, and hundreds of people came here to the heart of Chelmsford at Duke Street. And just to my right, there's a memorial here, and young people, veterans and more laid wreaths here just after the 2-minute silence was held here just after 11 a.m. There are people from across the county, just as we've seen across the UK, and we spoke to some of them after the service, and this is what they had to say.
I think it's fantastic. I've only started doing it for the last 5 years, maybe 6 years, and it's really good. I think myself, I think it's what's needed. You know, we're all the same. We all bleed the same. Doesn't matter white, black, whatever. We are all part of this world. So as far as I'm concerned, the people who are giving their lives for our freedom, if I can't give them half hour, standing in the rain like yourselves, you know, lovely day.
Well, every year we come to the cenotaph to remember the fallen and those of us. I have relatives who are in the forces serving today, and so I make my mark each year. It's something we need to remember, we shouldn't forget, and each year I see it as my duty to do it, and I come to do it every year without fail, no matter what the weather.
Oh, I thought it was really great. It was quite a good time to reflect and think about people who died and stuff, hence the rain and the cold and everything. We were standing right in front of, was it the RAF cadets? Which was really cool because we could see them focusing, and we saw the cannon fire as well, which was really interesting actually.
So I was chatting to Nana, and then I suddenly
Seen and heard there were people from all ages, all backgrounds who were here in Chelmsford, and during that service we saw today poetry was read out reflecting on those who have served for this country and those who are serving at the moment, to reflect on the freedoms that this country has in this day and age. And as we heard from some of those people, they're saying this is now something I'm going to be doing every single year to remember those who've given the freedoms we enjoy today.
Thank you so much, Theo, Jack and Doogie and Cameron. Thank you all. So that's what's been happening across the country here in the UK with Remembrance Sunday. If you just tuned in, welcome on board. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. I'm Nana Akua. Of course, now it's time to go head-to-head for a clash of minds, and joining me to do that, I have the fabulous Ben Habib and Dennis McShane. And the first question would be now, should the police be given more powers to stop the protests? We saw the protests as they were. Today is a lovely, peaceful and calm day, which is wonderful, and it seems that they've honoured the fact that it's Remembrance Sunday. But we saw the scenes yesterday. So I'm going to ask you first, Ben Habib, is it... Should the police have powers? Because apparently they don't have the power to stop a protest like the pro-Palestinian protest happening on a national day.
Yeah. Well, can I just say, first of all, isn't it remarkable how today has been so harmonious? So this poignant commemoration could take place without the backdrop of all the charged political, don't want to use the word hatred, but it was a really bad day for the United Kingdom, I thought, yesterday. And it was testimony to the fact that we shouldn't have had the protest yesterday. And any decent organiser of that march would have recognised the importance of the day to the United Kingdom and wouldn't have organised it. And that leads me to my next point, which is the reason we're talking about the need for greater powers is because social policies in the United Kingdom aren't working. We had the Home Secretary in Washington a few weeks ago talking about how multiculturalism in this country hasn't worked, that it's failed. And we saw that in evidence manifested on our streets yesterday. And so instead of giving police more powers, what I would like to see is a less draconian response from government, but a more holistic approach to the social integration of our country. We've had more immigrants come into this country in the last 25 years than in all of time before that. And whilst I'm not at all against immigration, whilst I think interaction with other cultures and the taking on of values, which is sharing of values, sharing debates, and moving forward as a better, more homogeneous society is a welcome thing. We've got to think this through more greatly. To the extent that people come to this country, they must be assimilated. They must learn British values. They must learn British history. We've got to come together as a nation. And what we saw yesterday on the streets of London was division in our country. And I don't think the right response is more kind of police power, because all you're trying to do then is to muffle the problem.
But why not? I mean, surely the police should be allowed, if there's a situation like this and we've got a national day, people will manipulate that day, as I believe that's what the protesters did. I mean, people were very busy to call Suella Braverman names for her supposedly provocative language. But I believe the protest set on this day was provocative in itself.
Oh, I think the fact that we had harmony today proves that Suella Braverman was right, that there shouldn't have been a protest yesterday.
Dennis McShane.
Well, very simply, one of the core British values, and I speak as somebody who's worked abroad, is freedom, and freedom also to demonstrate on the street, even if you really don't like what's being said. In other countries, it's met with tear gas, with water cannons, with charges.
Yeah, they're democratic countries as well, like France.
And America much more. In America, you've got a fair chance if the cops are cross of a black guy dying at the end of one of those demonstrations. That's the United States, a great country. Now, I don't want to restrict freedom. I'm astonished to be here with Ben.
I'm delighted to be here with you, Dennis.
Well, I love being with you, but
you knew he was here.
Here you are, coming on as take away freedom. Take away freedom. Restrict what people do. I saw the fag end of that march just after going home, because it went near where I live in Pimlico. It was peaceful. It was a bit daffy. I argued the week before, better for the Palestinian movements to say, we'll not do it this weekend. We're going to live with that.
Well, that's what I was advocating.
No, I'm not against it, but I wouldn't be frantic about it, because the Chief of Police, the Metropolitan Chief Police Commissioner, said, no, we can handle this. Trust the police. Don't trust the media and the politicians of all sorts whipping this up. I remember when the left wing always wanted to ban marches. Now it's you guys who want to ban marches.
Hang
on, we won yesterday. The good people of Britain won. There are a few.
Sorry, you said who won? Sorry, you said the good people of Britain. Who do you mean by that?
The people, the police, the people in the middle of Britain who said we don't have to ban a march or set water cannon on it. It will be peaceful. We had 120 unpleasant racists who rampaged through London London, all carrying badges of Suella Braverman, to carry out their hate campaign.
No, hold on.
120 out of 60 million. We can live with that.
You're saying 120 what? You're saying from what side? From who?
Well, I'm talking about the 120 who were arrested. Obviously, there were more of them.
That's the current tally. But do bear in mind the Metropolitan Police are now going through, trawling through the footage of people carrying banners with swastikas and people chanting.
And I hope they find that woman. It was a white woman.
I'm just
sorry.
Sorry, hold on.
Woman.
Can I finish, please? I'm saying that the 120 that you said, which wasn't very many, may end up being quite a considerable number more. Is what
I doubt it.
Well, I don't doubt it. I don't doubt it at all. There's a lot of people that the police are looking for.
Honestly, perhaps because I started life doing great demos about Vietnam a long time ago, a stupid war where American boys were sent to be killed for no good reason. We were right to demonstrate. The police charged us with horses.
But the question is, the question is...
What are you actually saying? You shouldn't demonstrate.
Sorry, Dennis, let's get back to the question. The question is, should the police be given more powers to sort of stop these sort of demonstrations?
I think you very kindly gave myself and Ben a list, and I had no idea the powers the police have. They actually have got enormous powers if they want to. Mr. Rowley, Sir Mark Rowley, could have said that demonstration isn't taking place, and it wouldn't have taken place. He thought, where should Britain be? With freedom or with politicians? And some of the media, could be left-wing media, right-wing media, telling us what to do.
Well, listen, at the moment, at present, due to Article 11, the police actually lack the authority to stop many forms of protest from taking place. So that's why I'm asking you the question. So that is how it actually sits.
But I think the sad thing for me is that we have a society... the sad thing for me is that we have a society where large minorities don't recognise the importance of days like yesterday, and they don't voluntarily step down from marching. They didn't have to protest yesterday. They've protested every single weekend for the last 3 or 4 weeks, and they'll no doubt have future protests. Yesterday was inflammatory. The language used by that march was inflammatory. It was advocating effectively the erasure of Israel, which is unacceptable to any decent human being, and that shouldn't have taken place on Armistice Day.
Well, listen, that's their views. What's yours? gbviews@gbnews.com. Tweet me now. Let me know what you think. This is GB News. We are the People's Channel. Coming up, will the Labour Party's tax laws drive away the wealthy? I'll be debating that with my panel. Send me your thoughts as ever. That's on the way next.
Who is it? We're here for the show. Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour with me, John Cleese. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie.
Second best.
You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these three.
Oh! No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays at 9 on GB News.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's, at drive time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app, and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
It's just coming out to 27 minutes after 3 o'clock. This is GB News. We are the People's Channel. I'm Nana Akua. It's time to go head-to-head in a clash of minds, and on the menu is this one. Italy. They've received authorisation to establish migration holding centres in rural Albania. Now, similar to that of the, guess what, the Rwanda plan, of course, and it anticipates the passage of up to 3,000 migrants a month through the facility. Later this week, the UK Supreme Court will deliver its verdict on the legitimacy or legality of Rwanda, and in light of Italy's recent approval of a comparable scheme, will the Rwanda plan be accepted this time and given the green light? Let's see what my head-to-headers make of that. Joining me now, Deputy Leader of Reform, the Reform Party, Ben Habib, and the former Labour Minister for Europe, Dennis McShane. Dennis, I'm starting with you. Does Italy's migration proposal give the green light for Rwanda?
I think it's got absolutely nothing to do with it, because they're operating fully within European rules. It's an agreement with Albania, which wants to join the European Union, which is in the European Convention of Human Rights. Is it because these people are white, more white than the other ones? I assume, from what I know of Albanian and incoming Albanian and Italian immigrants, the paradox is that Mrs Meloni, the very right-wing leader of Italy, also said about a month, 6 weeks ago, that she was authorising 425,000 immigrants from Asia and Africa to come to do the necessary work that Italy needs. So they're opening the floodgates, the doors to necessary workers.
Well, that's migration. That's how it should be. You choose the work for the workers.
No. They're just saying, please come, because we need the people to make sure the cafes work, the restaurants work. They have a problem. They're now selling houses in remote Italian hillside towns for €1 a piece. Come on, the three of us can go and buy 10 each, because Italians don't want to go and live in remote places. So they're now looking to immigrants to regenerate remoter bits of Italy. It's a bit more complicated. Rwanda,
what's wrong with
I'm nothing against that. And frankly, I can't get manically worked up about Rwanda. Israel's the only, talking about Israel, the only country that's tried it, sent African immigrants to Rwanda. They stayed 2 weeks in the same places that we might send people to, and then they hot-footed it back to Israel. They won't be locked up.
But it's a processing centre, so that's the idea. That's how it works, right?
Yeah,
but the question is, what's wrong with, what's the difference between Rwanda and Albania? Because the principle is exactly the same. You're sending people for processing in another country. What's the difference?
A very, very good point, and I could argue that we should have opened processing centres in Calais, because we actually had far more immigrants than the Albanians are sending to Italy in Calais, the jungle. You remember all of that? And then we should have processed them.
Yeah, but I've asked you a question specifically because you said that it was totally different to...
Well, in a sense...
So why is it different? What's different about it?
Well, the simple reason is every person there, Albanian and Italian officials, accept freely the rules of the European Convention of Human Rights, the European Court of Human Rights.
Are you saying that Rwanda is uncivilised?
Good God, no! Don't be silly. But I mean, they're not anything. They're not operating under European law. The problem for dear old Suella is, when she's not stirring up trouble with the police, is that she wants to break international law. That's the argument. I mean, the Supreme Court will decide that on Wednesday.
Yeah. So, I mean, I don't think, in principle, they're identical. Both plans won't work because they are a pimple of an attempt to resolve a much bigger problem. Italy had 130,000 illegal migrants enter it last year. 330,000 entered Europe across the Mediterranean. A third of those actually also went through Western Balkans, including Albania. So Albania is a source of illegal migration from Northern Africa and elsewhere. What we need is to stop the boats before they land on European soil. Deportation is no solution to border control.
But it worked for Australia. It worked for them. So
absolutely, we should be doing it.
But it worked for Australia. They sent people somewhere else when they were...
Oh, yeah, but Australia had a dual system. Australia had Operation Sovereign Borders, where they intercepted boats coming in from Indonesia. They either turned those boats round or they even boarded those boats.
But you have to do one first.
Back.
You have to do one of them first. So the one of them
you can have an integrated approach.
They could eventually do that.
And Australia isn't part of the European Convention of Human Rights, and it took people straight to the islands on which they were deposited.
It feels like there's an argument for us to leave it.
But that was border control.
Yeah.
They never got to Australia.
Well, listen, I've got to wrap this up briefly because I've got to go to the news. But what are your thoughts? GBViews@gbnews.com. I'd love to hear them. I will read some of those emails as well. Still to come. Are Labour Party, are their tax laws going to push the rich out of Britain? We'll be discussing that, going head-to-head with my panel. Make sure you get in touch. But first, let's get your latest news headlines with Aaron.
And it is 3:32. I'm Aaron Armstrong. The King has led the nation observing a 2-minute silence on Remembrance Day, honouring fallen soldiers. The Prince of Wales was among the senior royals to stand behind King Charles, with the monarch wearing the uniform of the Marshal of the Royal Air Force. He then laid a wreath similar to the one produced for King George VI. The Prime Minister, Labour leader and former Prime Ministers were also at the Cenotaph in central London, and they were joined by other senior politicians and dignitaries. The Met Police says it's actively investigating possible cases of hate crime following yesterday's Armistice Day disorder. Hundreds of thousands of pro-Palestinian protesters marched through central London, which led to pockets of violence. 9 officers were injured and 126 people arrested, including 92 far-right counter-protesters. The force released images of people it's seeking who were pictured carrying anti-Semitic placards. The Home Secretary who attended today's Remembrance service is being blamed for stoking tensions during the pro-Palestinian protests. During the week, Suella Braverman described the demonstrators as taking part in hate marches. Scottish First Minister Humza Yousaf is among the growing chorus of those calling for her to go.
I'm afraid that the Home Secretary's position, in my view, is untenable. She should, in fact, not even be allowed to resign. She should just be sacked by the Prime Minister, because no Home Secretary should be fanning the flames of division. Quite the opposite.
Weather warnings have been issued for Northern Ireland, England and parts of Wales as Storm Debbie approaches, the 4th named storm of the season. Heavy rain and gale-force winds with gusts of up to 80 miles an hour are expected. Earlier this month, Storm Ciarán caused widespread flooding. The Met Office says yellow alerts will come into force from 3 a.m. tomorrow morning and will finish around 6 o'clock in the evening. That's it for the moment from me, but there's more on our website, gbnews.com. Now back to Nana.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
There's only 3 people you can trust in life. Your doctor, your lawyer and your nana.
I'm not sure.
So join me, Nana Akua, at 3 p.m. every Saturday and Sunday, where we discuss the biggest topics of the weekend. Be ready for battle. Could you be quiet? What is this?
It's my new teeth.
It's your new teeth. I don't bite. Well, not without a good reason. Always honest, always fun. Every weekend at 3 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's at Drive Time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
If you just joined in or tuned in, I'm Nana Akua. This is GB News live on TV, online and on digital radio. It's fast approaching 39 minutes after 3 o'clock, and it's time to go head-to-head in a clash of minds. The state of Florida in the United States has emerged as an increasingly favoured residential destination for the affluent, with its combination of low taxes and a lovely warm climate. I've been there. It's lovely. And a growing number of wealthy Brits are opting to relocate there, driven by concerns about potential tax burdens anticipated under a Labour government. Now, the wealthy are worried that Labour is going to get in at the next election, and the ongoing trend of individuals choosing to emigrate raises concerns about the potential economic repercussions for the British economy. So let's see what my panel, my head-to-headers, make of that. I'm joined by Deputy Leader of the Reform Party, Ben Habib, and former Labour Minister for Europe, Dennis McShane. I'm going to start with you, Ben Habib.
Well, Florida is not just attracting people from this country, it's actually attracting people from New York, from Chicago and from other places in the US, where taxes also are very high. And what it evidences, if evidence is ever needed, is that where you have low taxation on people and businesses, you will attract investment, whether it's in the form of buying houses or investing in the location or opening new factories or whatever it is. And what our government has singularly failed to recognise is that we have the highest tax burden, as you said, Nana, since World War II. We need to be cutting taxes urgently, or we will see not just a brain drain, we will see businesses relocating out of the United Kingdom. We've already got evidence of that. AstraZeneca chose the Republic of Ireland for its new research facility over Liverpool, and it's cited the corporation tax rate in the UK is the reason for it. We are damaging the UK with our high tax rate. It is not about fighting inflation, doing the prudent and sensible thing, as Jeremy Hunt keeps telling us. What it is a government unable to cut its cloth according to its means, levying massive burdens on the British people and effectively forcing us out of this country. And we saw that last year. 500,000 young Brits left this country because they can't afford to live here.
Dennis McShane.
Well, that's a very good point, because we're not growing fast enough, and one reason, we're getting into the argument, is you cut all trade, or most trade with Europe, of course you become poor. Now, Florida I loved, took children there to Disneyland, to Orlando. I enjoyed the guys who walked behind the elephants, scooping up the elephant poop. I think that's often what politicians do in this country as well. But not sure I want to live in, a place where the only food you eat, choice between KFC and McDonald's, where you have a rampagingly homophobic governor, Mr. DeSantis. I mean, really ugly anti-gay laws. And there are many places in Europe, around the world. You can go to the Channel Islands, you can go to Monte Carlo. Imagine who you might meet in Monte Carlo and pay less tax. I think taxes should come down generally, especially on what ordinary people consume. But we've had 10, 13 years of no growth, of austerity, of public services that are a joke. And believe me, I lived in Switzerland. I know what it is to pay private healthcare insurance. That's also a tax.
But the point is that we're talking about the Labour Party and whether you can trust them to actually put the taxes down. Because that's why people are leaving. It's not because of where we are now. They're concerned about where we're going.
OK, well, I mean, the last Labour government put some taxes down, some taxes up. There's a lot of teaming and ladling. What we've generally had in the last... everybody on the left of the Labour Party is going bonkers because Keir Starmer and Rachel Reeves and Darren Jones, the Shadow Chief Secretary, are making very, very clear everything is going to try and be focused on growth and not on increasing taxes. I tell you something, a little secret. Labour, most of my life, has always increased spending when they came in and then started to put up taxes
to pay for it. That's not a secret, Dennis. That's why they're going.
I think we've all noticed that.
That's why they're leaving, Dennis.
They're leaving from a Tory government, but it's never worked. Blair was the first one who got into terrible trouble by maintaining...
But can we trust them? Look, I think
you can't trust them.
I think you're avoiding saying
you can't trust the Conservatives either. You can't trust the Conservatives either.
Who's worse?
Well, it's a choice between the deep blue sea and the deep blue sea. Jeremy Hunt wants to put up tax again just before Christmas.
What's he doing?
That's the way they think. They think that the state has all the answers. They need the cash. They will find the solutions. They'll tax us because they can't trust us with our money. They'll redistribute it. There'll be no wealth creation, and we are going down in a doom loop. We need a reversal of fundamental policy at the heart of government.
Elect Ben. Make him Prime Minister.
Well, he's already Deputy Leader of Reform, so he's about to... I'm waiting for his party political broadcast. That hasn't come in yet.
Well, that was kind of it.
That was the next bit, wasn't it? Yeah. Well, that's the thing. I mean, what do you think at home? Can you trust the Labour Party with your money? They are looking like it's more and more likely they might get into power, although it depends how much Keir Starmer says, because the more he says, the worse it gets. So I think he's keeping extremely quiet. But I'm wondering what you think about it. Are you confident that if you do end up with a Labour government that they will be safe with your taxes? Let's get your view, because these two have told you what they think. I'll read your messages in just a moment. But the Health Secretary has instructed NHS chiefs to cease the promotion of woke ideology. I don't think they can manage it. Emphasising concerns about the expenditure of £13 million on diversity roles. Now, the NHS has been advised against investing time and resources in dedicated diversity staff and the promotion of this woke ideology. And this raises the fundamental question. There are £13 million a year diversity stars, and that's just not... They're not earning that individually, but are they actually needed in the NHS, Dennis?
Sadly, I assume the answer has to be yes, because there are problems, huge problems just reported recently of nurses, particularly nurses coming in from outside England, being appallingly treated, including sexual abuse, by senior doctors in the operating theatre. So I've just been in, it was in hospital, a tiny, unimportant little operation. I loved it, it was good, and it was a mixture of different people from different parts of the world, different parts of Europe, and shows Britain at its best. We've always been a nation of immigrants and of immigration, and getting them to work for us. I'm nervous of always trashing any effort. The first pamphlet I ever wrote was to say we need more black and Asian reporters on the BBC. There were none when I started working at the BBC, and people told me
How long ago was that?
Well, it was probably before you were born.
1850?
So let's see. How many black people do you think there must have been in the UK? There probably weren't many. And they probably weren't that old.
Huge, qualified, excellent journalists. At the moment the BBC embraced a bit of McShane wokery 40 years ago, we got some of our best reporters.
So I've got you to thank for being here now, Dennis.
You've got a lot to thank me for, Nana.
Look, but listen, I hear you. There was a time when that was necessary. I think there was a moment where we had to take a look at ourselves and start to include others in there and not be so short-sighted. But I think that time has gone and it's going in reverse. What do you think?
Well, I mean, I think a number of things. First of all, it is too much money, but this is the worst kind of politics from Steve Barclay, because £13 million constitutes less than 0.1% of the budget of the NHS. And the other more substantial point...
Yeah, but each of those diversity stars, a lot of them on up to 100k, could pay for some nurses.
No,
so
I mean, absolutely, get rid of the expenditure. But it's the worst kind of politics from Stephen Barclay, because he knows that's not going to fix the big black monetary hole that is the NHS.
But it's a start.
But it's a start. But the other thing is that the NHS is obliged to have these czars. The NHS is obliged to promote diversity through the DEI regulatory regime, which affects every single institution in this country. If Stephen Barclay's...
But does it need a specific person to focus on that? Because I would imagine each trust would have some level of HR. So why is it not integrated within the role of HR? Why does it have to be an individual?
I mean, Nana, every single company, including mine, a small company, I regard my own company as a small company, has to report on their ESG credentials, which includes the S is social, and that's the banner under which diversity, equality and inclusion needs to be delivered. You have to report on it. We have a dedicated individual as a small company having to do it. And we're not allowed as a regulated business.
But they might do other things in the company as well, so they're not just specifically...
They're pretty much just doing that, measuring our carbon footprint, answering questionnaires on our diversity. It's a massive burden on business. And the NHS is obliged to do it. And what I would say to Stephen Barclay is, instead of castigating the NHS, which is fine, you can castigate the NHS, but do that legitimately. More importantly, roll back this regulatory regime, which is putting a knee on the neck of the United Kingdom's economy. We need it to stop. And diversity, equality and inclusion is embedding racism. It is embedding division. It is part of the reason why we saw on the streets of London yesterday what we saw, because the police are taught that they must be tolerant of diverse views, and it's gone mad. What's happening now is reverse racism in our society, and I would say that as a child I experienced much less racism than I do in the country now, but the racism now is against white people. And the prejudice is against our history, our values, our language, where we came from and what we stand for. And that's got to stop. And Stephen Barclay can stop it because he's in the government. But what he mustn't be doing is this kind of dog whistle politics, attacking the NHS for actually fulfilling a regulatory regime set by the government.
I can listen to Ben trashing Stephen Barclay for the next 5 hours. He's the worst health secretary we've ever had since the NHS was founded. I'm a bit nervous to say we must combat tolerance. We can't have tolerance. No, you did. You were saying, and we've got too many examples in too many businesses where still people with the wrong voice, the wrong face, don't get the same crack of the whip as
Dennis, reverse racism is not progressive. Well, it is the embedding of racism. What we've got to get back to is everyone is equal. It doesn't matter what colour, creed, or whatever you believe. What matters is the content of your character and the contribution you can make to the organisation for which you work. That's all that matters. Meritocracy. If we get away from meritocracy, the country is in trouble.
Well, meritocracy, as defined in terms of employment in other countries, I mean, in France, everybody is a meritocrat. A career ouvert, I mean, your career is open just to your talents, nothing else. But my goodness, that requires far more counting, far more checking, far more ensuring that people are only being employed on merit. I'm not against, I mean, I'm completely with you. We've got too many state or public sector bureaucrats in too many areas not doing anything productive and useful. We could cut an awful lot of them out, and I really hope Rachel Reeves and Keir Starmer, because the Tories haven't done it for 13 years.
They won't do that. Come on, you are having a laugh. What actually got me was at their party conference when they all stood and spoke, that they were all white, standing, the leaders, the ones who were the front.
Isn't that interesting?
Which is ironic, it seems. So
David Lammy?
No, when they spoke at their conference, those that were standing... Hold on, let me finish.
All right.
Because you're just talking about some people who weren't actually standing up.
They were making keynote
But
speeches.
at the main section, there were 5 of them standing. You had Rachel Reeves, Keir Starmer, Angela Rayner. There was 2 others. They were all white, and they were talking. And I just looked and I thought, these are the main names of the Labour Party, and these are the people that were standing and talking. And I know it's quite disappointing.
Well, I'm sorry if you think that. I mean, I'm not necessarily arguing.
But I'm concerned that they actually...
But all I do is bump into friends holding the most senior positions, shadow foreign secretaries, shadow community centres, shadow this secretary, and they're not...
But we've got to get away from identity politics.
I agree with that
We've got to just focus on what's good for the country.
Yeah, I agree with you, Ben. Anyway, it's time to look at the content of what these people can deliver rather than what colour they are. I think actually it's a bit of a red herring. You think, we've got 2 black ones, one of this, one of that.
Well, you were complaining, Nana. You were the one complaining there weren't enough or something.
When was I complaining about this?
Just said, well, a minute ago you were saying, I looked and I couldn't see any
No, I said that's the irony.
faces.
That's the irony of the Labour Party. I'm not saying that that's... Listen, my point is this. They talk a good game, but they're not demonstrating what they're saying. I'm not saying that what they should do. I'm suggesting that they are going on... No, hold on. You said something, so I'll finish. I'm saying that they're banging on about this diversity, and they're the least diverse with their leading players in their party, so I don't want to hear it from them. What I am also pointing out is that actually it's ultimately irrelevant. We've moved on from there, and that was the point of this question, whether it is now time to really focus on what people can deliver rather than having diversity and inclusion stars and things like that.
No problems with that, but it
too
has
much money,
to...
13 million on that.
No problem with that, but I'm afraid it will be another measurement, Tsar, for poor old Ben and his firm to ensure that everybody's promoted on merit. I wish that was the case.
Well, let's see what people are saying, because on all the topics that we've been talking about, this one's... hi, Nana. I agree with Ben entirely about inclusivity. I always maintain that inclusivity is the exclusivity of the majority, and most of us are being discriminated against. That's Susan. She says that. We're talking about protests, and Chris says they should have be banned, full stop. Tyrone's message in saying about Humza Yousaf, because we were talking about him as well. He said Humza Yousaf should go, Suella Braverman says the right things. I wish that she was the First Minister of Scotland. There you go, there you have it.
So does the Tory party.
I wish she was the First Minister of the United Kingdom. Well, but Humza Yousaf should definitely go.
Well, he's got a nerve saying that other people should go. You've seen his terrible...
Ben and I agreeing again. Stop this now. You've got to get us disagreeing.
Well, David says, not a chance would I trust Labour. We're talking about whether you trust Labour with the taxes. I know many are warning to them, but a lot has seen the ugly side rear its head yet again. It's clear the anti-Semitism is still a major issue, and that they have nothing new to offer. That is an issue with the Labour Party. They seem to be hearing this.
Clearly. Well, Jeremy Corbyn was out with the marchers yesterday. John McDonnell was out with the marchers yesterday.
Well, I've got a proposal which Ben might agree with. In France today, President Macron and senior government ministers are leading giant marches to protest against anti-Semitism. They're also happening in the regional cities.
Let's do it here.
Let's get Sunak and Starmer and decent people out there saying we will not have anti-Semitism in Britain.
Well, we'd all like to see that. We'd all like to see less of the anti-Semitism and all that business, wouldn't you? Listen, stay tuned. Loads more still to come. My monologue is on the way. This is GB News. We are the People's Channel. I'll be discussing the Home Secretary, Suella Braverman. Is she brave indeed? You won't want to miss that. Let's get some weather.
Hello there, I'm Jonathan Vautry, here with your GB News weather forecast provided by the Met Office. Storm Debbie has been named by Met Air and the Irish Weather Service and is expected to be picked up by the jet stream and powered towards Ireland and the UK as we head throughout tonight and into Monday. Potential for some disruptive weather, particularly for Northern Ireland, the Irish Sea coastal areas and across northern areas of England where severe gales are possible. For this evening, we see this band of rain pushing its way northwards into Scotland, but it's here Storm Debbie arriving in the southwest. Some very heavy rain pushing into England, Wales and then particularly Northern Ireland later on. Very persistent here. Some flooding is possible. A swathe of gales developing in the west as well. With all the cloud, the rain and the wind, it will be a milder night compared to last, but a touch of frost is still possible across rural areas of northern Scotland. A very unsettled start to the new working week and a very disruptive morning rush hour as well. Heavy rain pushing its way in, eventually reaching parts of Scotland. A swathe of severe gales, 80 mile an hour possible winds across coastal areas of northwest England, 55 to 60 mile an hour possible across the Pennines and other areas of northern England. It does turn brighter for central southern areas of England and Wales later on in the day. Temperatures around 15-16 degrees Celsius here, but still feeling a bit colder than that where you are exposed to the blustery winds. Into Tuesday, it's not as disruptive as Monday, but it is going to remain fairly unsettled. A mixture of sunshine and showers. Those showers could be heavy at times with some thunderstorms and hail in the mixture as well. And we hold on to the unsettled theme into the middle part and second half of the week as well, with more wet and windy weather on the way. Bye-bye.
Who is it? We're here for the show. Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour with me, John Cleese. I was married to a therapist. And you survived? I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie. Second best. You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like? I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these three. Oh!
No, thank you. My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays at 9 on GB News.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's, at drive time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Made their way into mainstream
welcome
media.
to GB News on TV, online
bit...
and on digital radio. I'm Nana Akua. And for the next 2 hours, me and my panel will be taking on some of the big topics hitting the headlines right now. This show is all about opinion. It's mine, it's theirs, and of course it's yours. We'll be debating, discussing, and at times we will disagree, but no one will be cancelled. So joining me today, it's broadcaster and journalist Danny Kelly, and also broadcaster and author Christine Hamilton. Before we get started, let's get your latest news with Aaron.
Very good afternoon to you. It's just gone 4 o'clock. I'm Aaron Armstrong in the GB Newsroom. The Home Secretary's condemned anti-Semitic behaviour at the Armistice Day demonstration in London yesterday. Hundreds of thousands of pro-Palestinian protesters marched peacefully through the capital, but the Met Police says it's actively investigating possible cases of hate crime. Pockets of violence did erupt later in the evening. 9 officers were injured and 126 people arrested, including 92 right-wing counter-protesters. British Transport Police is also investigating a racially aggravated altercation at London Waterloo and has released photos of 4 men it's trying to identify. They also want to speak to a woman over an alleged anti-Semitic hate crime at Victoria Station. Meanwhile, the Home Secretary who attended today's service at the Cenotaph is being blamed for stoking tensions ahead of the pro-Palestinian protest. During the week, Suella Braverman described the demonstrations as hate marches and questioned the integrity of the police for allowing yesterday's rally to go ahead on Remembrance weekend. The Scottish First Minister, Humza Yousaf, is among the growing chorus of voices calling for her to go.
I'm afraid that the Home Secretary's position, in my view, is untenable. She should, in fact, not even be allowed to resign. She should just be sacked by the Prime Minister, because no Home Secretary should be fanning the flames of division. Quite the opposite.
Defence Secretary Grant Shapps has defended his cabinet colleague, though.
Job as Home Secretary is to make sure that, quite properly, that the powers exist and then the powers are then used within the operational independence of the police to make sure that marches and protests are properly policed, and where the laws have been broken, as they clearly have been in some cases, that those prosecutions take place. That is what a Home Secretary is there for. Now, I wouldn't have quite put it in her language. It's not the language I would have used, but the point still stands.
The King has led the nation, observing a 2-minute silence on Remembrance Day, honouring fallen soldiers. The Prince of Wales was among the senior royals to stand behind King Charles, with the monarch wearing the uniform of the Marshal of the Royal Air Force. He then laid a wreath similar to the one produced for King George VI. The Prime Minister, Labour leader and former Prime Ministers were also at the Cenotaph in central London, and they were joined by other senior politicians and dignitaries. A man has been charged with the murder of a mother who was killed in front of her children in Manchester. Perseverance in Kube was found with a single stab wound to the chest in the early hours of Friday morning. She died later in hospital. 45-year-old Obert Moyo has been charged with possession of an offensive weapon, and he's due to appear in court tomorrow. Weather warnings have been issued for Northern Ireland, England and parts of Wales as Storm Debbie approaches. The 4th storm of the season has been named. Heavy rain is forecast with gusts of up to 80 miles per hour expected. Earlier this month, Storm Ciarán caused widespread flooding. The Met Office's yellow alerts will come into force from 3 a.m. tomorrow, ending at 6 o'clock in the evening. And Iceland is preparing for a volcanic eruption after being hit by a series of earthquakes over the last few days. Authorities say there is evidence of magma spreading rapidly underground in the island's southwest. Around 3,000 residents have been evacuated from the town of Grindavik. One of the most popular attractions of the island, the Blue Lagoon Spa, has also been forced to close. Well, this is GB News. We're live across the UK on TV, on digital radio and on your smart speaker too. Now, it's back to Nana.
Good afternoon. If you just tuned in, welcome on board. It's just coming up to 4 minutes after 4 o'clock. I'm Nana Akua. This is GB News live on TV, online and on digital radio. Oh, they're all queuing up to get rid of Suella, to put in their 2 pennies worth. I'm so bored of this. Here's Humza Yousaf drawing the attention away from his own woeful mismanagement of Scotland.
I'm afraid that the Home Secretary's position, in my view, is untenable. She should, in fact, not even be allowed to resign. She should just be sacked by the Prime Minister, because no Home Secretary should be fanning the flames of division. Quite the opposite.
Come on. I mean, the truth is, she was right. The previous marches were marred with hate, and on that basis, she had every right to expect the same again. And I don't think that she was wrong on this one either. The hate was just hidden a bit better yesterday. I mean, that's not to say that a lot of people weren't marching for peace, But there were people wearing Hamas headbands, racist banners, one woman with a banner of Rishi and Suella with coconuts around them, banners with swastikas hidden in the Star of David, and people chanting from the river to the sea and trying to justify their words, claiming that they are not offensive. Well, all you have to do is ask a Jewish person their view, if you have any doubt. The very fact that such a march was scheduled for Armistice Day is provocative, to say the least. A day that we should have been remembering our own fallen heroes and armed forces. I mean, it was totally disrespectful and aimed at being incendiary. Yet, ironically, the focus was on condemnation of Suella and her words, which was seen as provocative. A bit of a double standard, really. I'm in no doubt that a lot of the people marching yesterday were not intending to condone hate. But if these people were truly marching for peace and wanted the ceasefire, I would have expected demands for the release of the hostages, maybe, that were held by Hamas as well, which is what Israel has been calling for in exchange. I would have also expected condemnation of Hamas themselves, but there didn't appear to be any of this. The truth is, the police were out of their depth. They had no option but to focus on the easier-to-handle, smaller crowd of the EDL who came out and caused trouble, which wasn't good either, because they are certainly no friend of Jewish people. The police choosing to deal with hate crimes within the wider pro-Palestinian march instead, later circulating images of people who broke the law because, frankly, it would have been too dangerous to attempt to make any arrests in case the crowd turned on them. So what should the Jewish people do whilst these marches are happening? Yesterday, our very own Lizzie Cundy was accosted on the tube on her way in. She was terrified.
I agree with Braverman calling it hate marches. I've actually just got involved with one.
Oh, really?
I was trying to get in today.
Oh, you should have
2
got your
hours
iPhone on,
stuck.
couldn't
They've closed all the roads. So I dumped the car and tried to walk to the tube. And I had a pro-Palestine protester come up to me saying, "Are you a Jew? Are you a Jew?" And I just didn't know what to do, actually. I was really scared. I ran to the tube station, which they've closed. Now there's trouble happening there, and I was very scared.
So to say that these marches are peaceful is actually ignoring the fact that Jewish people are afraid to leave their homes and were hounded outside synagogues, and actually it wasn't peaceful in the end. Look, I don't want anyone to die, and it is possible to believe that Israel are right to root out Hamas whilst also wanting the people of Gaza to be safe. I mean, it's so tragic to hear of incubators running out of power and babies dying. The situation in Gaza is horrendous, but Hamas don't appear to care. I'd like to see an end to the bloodshed, and soon. But what about the freedom of Jewish people and their right to feel safe on our streets? Well, before we get stuck into the debates, here's what else is coming up today. For the Great British Debate this hour, I'm asking, is Sadiq Khan right to blame Suella Braverman for the violence at the marches? The London Mayor has accused the Home Secretary of being responsible for the ugly scenes that broke out in the capital on Armistice Day, saying Suella Braverman has stirred up the so-called far right. So I'm asking, is Sadiq Khan right to blame Suella for the violence at those marches? Send me your thoughts, gbviews@gbnews.com, or tweet me at GBNews. Then, at 4:50, it's Worldview. I'll be speaking to the Israeli government spokesperson, Avi Hyman, on the situation in Gaza. As 4-hour humanitarian pauses have been agreed, I'll be asking if this decision is a wise one. He'll be live from Israel. We'll also cross over to Los Angeles with Paul Duttridge to get the latest on US politics, where Minnesota has rejected a bid to kick Donald Trump off the ballot. Stay tuned then at 5 o'clock. I've got my mystery guest. Now, my mystery guest, I'll give you some clues as to who he is, but just to say that he is a very famous individual who has a lot of sway in the political arena, but also, well, it's a surprise. You'll have to wait and find out more. That's coming up in the next hour. Tell me what you think and everything we're discussing. Email, I didn't recognise his jacket. Email gbviews@gbnews.com or tweet me at GBNews. Oh, God. Right, if you just joined in, welcome on board. Right, let's welcome again to my panel, broadcaster and journalist Danny Kelly, and author and broadcaster Christine Hamilton. Right, I'm going to ask you, Christine, first, but it's interesting that Dennis asked you about what did Dennis say to you when he saw you?
Dennis McShane in the green room just now, he said, "Hello, Christine." He said, "Where's your poppy?"
I said, Dennis...
Look at us,
I'm swathed in poppies with my British Legion scarf. He couldn't see the wood for the trees.
No, so I'm going to start with you, Christine,
Yes.
on this one then. So what do you think about that?
Well, Sadiq Khan will always blame somebody else for everything that goes wrong, won't he? It's never his fault. And for him to blame Suella Braverman is utterly ludicrous. She was right, and she's been proved right. What I don't see, going back one step, is these people, I think I'm right, they've marched for 4 Saturdays in a row. Why couldn't they give it a breather? It shows to me how much the march organisers disrespect our way of life and our traditions and our culture. They knew perfectly well what this weekend meant to ordinary Brits, and they deliberately chose it. And if it hadn't been for that march being allowed to go ahead, we would never have had the counter-march of all the right-wingers. Danny has something to say about that, these so-called right-wingers. We would never have had that march, and we would never have the scuffles. But the Met, I mean, what are the Met supposed to do? There aren't enough of them to take them on full-blown. They are frightened to step in. Of course they are. 1/3 of Metropolitan Police officers have less than 4 years' experience. Senior officers are always worried about wokeism, and they're terrified of being accused of racism, sexism, whatever it is. So it's no surprise, and it's all very well to, you know, take a photograph and we'll find them later. But how many of those people will they find? And what will the punishment be for real hate crime? I wonder, we'll see. But no, he's quite wrong to blame Suella.
So Danny, what is your view on these marches actually happening on Armistice Day, that first one anyway?
Well, do you know, there are over 500,000 minutes in a year, and all we ask as a British society, something that is sacrosanct, is that we ask you to keep your mouth shut for 2 of them on the 11th of the 11th. That's all we ask. You know, we're an incredibly tolerant society and we're a welcoming society. My point about politics is that I don't understand why every media outlet is labelling people either right-wing or far-right. Some of the most patriotic people in this country are left-wingers from council estates. They're called soldiers. The MOD actively target young men and women now from very deprived areas. Manchester, Liverpool, Newcastle. Not a right-winger amongst them. I think what the media is doing, and Sadiq Khan is being divisive here, he is politicising this. I don't know how those thugs with a warped sense of patriotism, I don't know how they voted. It wouldn't surprise me if some of them were ex-military, left-wingers. But what they did in a warped way, they did what they felt was the patriotic thing to do. Now, getting involved with skirmishes with police is the wrong thing to do. But Suella Braverman didn't need to write an article in the Sunday Times or the Times, forgive me. This was always going to happen because that day is sacrosanct, whether you're a left-winger or whether you're a right-winger. It's nothing to do with right-wing politics. Yes, Tommy Robinson turned up with 20 or 30 EDL goons. I get that. But there would have been plenty of people, all spectrums of the political divide, turning up because it was the patriotic thing to do. Nothing to do with politics.
Do you know, I remember going back when at 11/11/11 on Armistice Day, literally the whole country came to a halt. If you were in a shop, the shop stopped. If you were on a bus, the bus stopped. Literally, everybody respected that as though it was part of the Ten Commandments. But nowadays, I'll tell you what really annoyed me on Saturday, that during the 2-minute silence, you could hear helicopters going overhead. Now, why is that necessary? We know why they were there, because that march was allowed.
Do you know, back in 2001, you had the Oldham race riots, again going back to politics, where there were pitch battles for 3 nights, and there were pubs burnt, and there were mosques attacked, and these were white working-class lads who, because they live parallel lives to the Asian community up in Oldham, and each have entrenched ideas about how life should be. Again, these were lads from left-wing households. Now, this was during a Tony Blair government, 2001. So this happens at all times, under all politics. It's got nothing to do with right-wing, left-wing. It's to do with parallel lives that just don't rub along well.
Well, I'm afraid it's another example. Those riots and all the other things we've had are just an example of how multiculturalism has failed, and it was always going to fail, unfortunately. And this is just another classic
Yeah,
example.
personally, I wouldn't use the broad umbrella of multiculturalism has failed. There are great examples of where for example...
Overall, it's failed.
Well, OK, well, that's a view. I know of great examples where people assimilate, where they...
Of course.
Assimilation is the key to anything.
Of course.
If you are going to come into a country from a different part of the world with different social values, different belief systems, then I would like to think as the host country, then you would assimilate.
Absolutely.
And you would fit in, rather than there are areas of Birmingham. I've travelled 96 miles. I know this is a cliche, but there
it's
are
your
areas...
weekly statement. Danny has travelled 96 miles, everybody.
Yeah, from Royal Leamington Spa, which is very close to Birmingham. When I was working for the BBC in Birmingham, there are areas of Birmingham where predominantly there are very few white people. Now, you've got to ask yourself, if multiculturalism is such a success, how come that all the white people, not all of them, but the vast majority of them have moved out?
But you're proving my point. Multiculturalism has failed.
In areas.
In massive areas. And my final thing, because I'm sure Nana wants to move on, is if Hamas is serious, and if people marching are serious, why weren't they marching with placards that said, free the hostages, free the hostages?
Well, that's my point in there,
That's
isn't it?
what they should have been marching.
Because if you look at all of this, I'd like to see people asking for peace. I'd like to be able to see Israeli flags alongside Palestinian flags. I'd like to see people condemning Hamas. I'd like to see people asking for the release of the hostages. None of that was there. That wasn't there. You had a very divisive thing going on. You had people who seemed perfectly nice and normal, carrying banners that had swastikas embedded in the Star of David. You had them singing from the river to the sea, which is an offensive chant. And I've listened to some radio programmes where people call in and attempt to justify why this is an acceptable chant when the Jewish people themselves don't find it acceptable. And that's the barometer. That is the measure as to whether it's acceptable.
That's right.
It's the River Jordan and it's the Mediterranean Sea, and the country in between is Israel. It is the obliteration of Israel that they're calling for. And if people don't know that, they shouldn't be joining a march like that.
But the bottom line is the only reason, and I you know, obviously all my sympathies go to the people in Gaza because it's horrendous what's happening.
Of course.
But the bottom line is the only reason Israel doesn't look like that is because of the Iron Dome. So it's not as though Hamas are not continuing to bombard Israel. The fact is that Israel invested their money in protecting their citizens, whereas it would appear Hamas invested money in tunnels underneath hospitals and places of safety so they can carry on with this. And I'd like to see it all end.
The ignorant irony of all of this, and going back to Lizzie being challenged, are you a Jew? What people are once again confusing, because they're deliberately conflating Zionism with the religion of Judaism. Now, Israel has existed for Jews to live. Now, Lizzie Cundy, I don't know whether Lizzie's a Jew or not.
She's not Jewish.
She's not Jewish, OK. Even if she was Jewish, the fact that she's living in England proves the fact that she doesn't necessarily have a personal interest in Zionism. Because if she was living in Israel, and any Jew on the planet can live in Israel, that's the deal, then all of a sudden that's part of the Zionist
In
argument.
your view, what's the difference between Zionism?
Well, Zionism is a geographical location for Jews to live. Judaism is a religion.
Thank you for that. Some people may
Do you think the chances of any Jewish person being out and about in London yesterday? I mean,
zero.
The Jewish friends that I have who live in central London have stayed at home.
Well, that's
they
the
dare
thing.
not go out.
That's the thing. That's the thing that people aren't talking about. Where they're saying, "Oh, yeah, it was very peaceful." Well, it was very peaceful if you're not Jewish. If you're not Jewish, it was very peaceful. Don't leave your house. Stay in your house. Don't go to the synagogue. If you're coming out of there, be warned. Some of them had to be escorted from there. So, in my view, that makes something very unpeaceful. It's not peaceful if that means that. And a lot of people who wanted to probably support Armistice Day didn't come out because they were fearful of being on the, you know, and people say, oh, the EDL, yeah, that wasn't acceptable either. I'm not saying that any of the protests are acceptable.
Nothing was acceptable.
I'm just saying that there shouldn't have been any of those protests on any day like that, and EDL would not have been there had it not been for the pro-Palestinian marches, which I would take that point on board as well. Well, listen, if you just tuned in, welcome on board. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. I'm Nana Akua. It's just coming up to 19 minutes after 4 o'clock. Up next, it's time for the Great British Debate this hour, and I'm asking, is Sadiq Khan right to blame Suella Braverman for the violence at the marches? Now, I've got a poll up on X right now asking that very question. Is Sadiq Khan right to blame Suella Braverman for the violence at the marches? Please cast your vote now. I'd love to hear your thoughts as well. Email me gbviews@gbnews.com or tweet me at gbnews.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels we're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
There's only three people you can trust in life: your doctor, your lawyer, and your nana.
I'm not sure.
So join me, Nana Akua, at 3 p.m. every Saturday and Sunday, where we discuss the biggest topics of the weekend. Be ready for battle.
Could you be quiet? What is this? It's my new
It's
teeth.
your new teeth. I don't bite. Well, not without a good reason. Always honest, always fun. Every weekend at 3 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Co, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is two new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's, at Drive Time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app, and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
Well, this is coming up to 23 minutes after 4 o'clock. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. If you just tuned in, welcome. It's now time for the Great British Debate this hour. I'm Nana Akua, and I'm asking, is Sadiq Khan right to blame Suella Braverman for the violence at the marches? Now, after yesterday saw clashes at both the pro-Palestinian march and the counter-protest in Whitehall, many are blaming the Home Secretary, Suella Braverman, for supposedly stoking tensions. And one of the main people calling for her resignation is London Mayor Sadiq Khan, which is not a surprise, who said that the London violence was a direct result of Braverman's words. He was also joined by Humza Yousaf, the Scottish First Minister, who also claimed that the far right had been emboldened by Mrs Braverman's fanning the flames of division and demanded that she resign. So for the Great British Debate this hour, I'm asking, is Sadiq Khan right to blame Suella Braverman for the violence at the marches? Well, I'm joined now by Ben Habib, Deputy Leader of the Reform Party, Dennis McShane, former Minister for Europe, James Mathewson, a former Labour Party spokesperson, and Neil Parish, a former Tory MP. So I'm going to start with you, Neil Parish. Is Sadiq Khan right to blame Suella Braverman for the violence at the marches?
No, because I think it's too simplistic, because my belief is that the marches shouldn't have taken place in the first place. Now, there's no doubt that Suella's comments, and certainly talking about a mob, didn't help, and it may have encouraged some right-wing gangs to be there. And let me make it clear, I mean, I am appalled by the violence on all sides. But I think, this was Remembrance Weekend. We did not need the marches, and I think you'll find there's almost difficulty on both sides because neither side will back down. And I think at the end of the day, those marches took place. There would have been violence, I'm afraid, because the right-wing groups were there looking for trouble. That's what they do. And it's right that the police take very strong action on all groups that break the law. But I think Suella Braverman was probably wrong in using the language she did, but I think it's very simplistic just to say it's all the fault of Suella Braverman, because I think it was wrong to have the marches in the first place.
Yeah, interesting, though, because it's not as if people haven't got their own minds. So, somebody might say something, then it's down to me to make the decision as to whether I act. So then for me to be blaming somebody else for making me do something, it seems a bit odd that suddenly becomes the narrative when they want to blame someone like Suella, when people have their own individual minds. James Mathewson.
Yeah, I understand what Neil's saying there, and I respect his view about the marches and all the rest of it. We happen to disagree on that. You won't be surprised to hear me say. However, I do believe that Sadiq Khan is right in this. Whenever you think of Sadiq Khan, I believe he's called this correctly, as is Humza Yusuf. And Suella Braverman has used the Donald Trump playbook every step of the way. She's used this incendiary language. It's purposefully divisive. It whips people up. It whips the tensions up of all sorts of groups of people. And unfortunately, yesterday we saw the impact of that. We saw these racist thugs, the likes of Tommy Robinson. I mean, we thought we'd done away with him for a long time. The man is a scumbag. He represents the worst of our society. And he was emboldened yesterday to take to the streets and try and disturb something that's incredibly important to people of all cultures and communities in this country.
Well, yeah, I mean, I hear you calling him a scumbag. He's not here to defend himself. I'm not defending him either, but he isn't here to defend himself, so I have to put that to you. But you're saying the Donald Trump playbook, but all she said was that these were hate marches, and there was a lot of hate on the march. Will you not at least admit that, James?
When she's conflated it to the likes of situations with Northern Ireland. I mean, so casually. This is one of the highest offices of state. And when you're in that position, every single word matters. And if you're not being cautious enough to check every single word, the impact it may have on different groups and different people in the country that you are standing to represent, then unfortunately you're either not smart enough to be Home Secretary or you are deliberately doing this. And I mean, I have to say, unfortunately, looking at Suella Braverman's track record, it seems I would go as far to say that she does know better than what she's doing. She's chosen this language purposefully.
But they're not lemmings. They're not just going to go along with it. Ben Habib.
Well, I don't think Suella Braverman is to blame for the marches, and we know that because we saw today a completely harmonious commemoration for Remembrance Sunday, and there were no marches. Yesterday was not harmonious. It was because 300,000 plus people decided to descend on London and espouse values which are alien to any civilised individual, calling for Palestine to be free from the river to the sea. In other words, advocating the obliteration of a legitimate democratic country. And that is unacceptable at every level. And that, for me, is hate. And you do not get peace in the Middle East by advocating hate. What they should have been doing on the march was championing peace. What they should have been asking for was for Hamas to release the hostages, for Hamas to give themselves up to the IDF so the Palestinians didn't have to suffer, and for a two-state system with the recognition of Israel and a peaceful long-term settlement. That would have been the right way to go forward. And Sadiq Khan, I'm afraid, is guilty of precisely what he accuses Suella Braverman of. He's constantly whipping up division amongst people. For example, I shouldn't have to remind people of this, but he was the one, his office, put out an image of a family of 4 white people saying they do not represent London. He is a master of manipulating division, and he should step down from attacking Suella Braverman.
Well, I think he subsequently did change that when he realised that the sort of anger that people were with regard to that, but that was part of his sort of style guide, wasn't that, within his mayoral pamphlet? Let's go to Dennis McShane. Dennis.
I'm simply at a loss. I just listened to Conservative MPs. I listened to Neil there. We could all fantasise the march shouldn't have taken place. I argued that a week ago, but it did. It was hugely peaceful compared to violence I can see outside football matches, many a Saturday or Sunday at the weekend. And the people who were attacked were the police by very ugly people, unrepresentative people like Tommy Robinson, who represent the worst of British political activism. And they were pulled onto the streets, everybody agrees, by the Home Secretary the Home Secretary attacking the Commissioner of the Metropolitan Police, who had a terrible decision to take. He's been 100% vindicated. We've preserved our freedom.
But Dennis, the week before, let's talk about the march the week before, because they were attacking police, they were throwing fireworks and everything, and a lot of the judgment may well have been based on that, which is what we've seen since the start of this. In fact, even before the marches or anything, even before Israel had retaliated, there was a lot of pro-Palestinian...
Yes, I mean, I would say let's follow the example of President Macron, the French government today, who've just been organising huge demonstrations in Paris and big French cities against anti-Semitism, with all politicians inviting, the far right, the left. Why can't we do that instead of obsessing? But Suella Braverman isn't interested in any of that. Every Tory MP, ask Neil.
You don't know.
Ask Neil. Every Tory MP.
You don't know that she's not interested in that. Ask Neil what? Ask him.
Ask Neil very simply, as representing Tory MPs, she is running to be the leader of the Conservative Party after Sunak goes back to California. That's what this is all about.
Do you think that's what it's about, Neil?
I don't think that is precisely what it's about. I think it is very much about the marches, like I said, shouldn't take place. There is always a certain amount of positioning in parties which you have to be very careful of. So, I mean, Dennis is not entirely wrong, but I think in the end, let's actually debate it, because I think the Jewish community are very worried about what's going on. Exactly. They feel fearful. And I think, really this march should never have taken place. And I think Suella Braverman had a really good point, but I think she overplayed it. And it's going to be interesting now, the politics of it, because you see, I think it was wrong for the marches to take place. If she had not made her comments, that's what we would have been talking about now. The problem politically is now we're talking exactly about what she said and how she handled herself. And that's where number 10 in the party will be getting very uncomfortable, I suspect.
OK, so let me ask you then, Neil. So yes or no then, is Sadiq Khan right to blame Suella for all the trouble that was there? Yes or no?
No, he's not right.
James Mathewson, yes or no? Is Sadiq Khan right to blame Suella?
Yes, entirely. Just the same as, we've held people like Donald Trump to account for his hate language that caused acts of immediate violence straight after. We should be holding Suella Braverman to exactly
Dennis McShane.
Yes, every police officer agrees with that point.
You don't know that. Not every police officer. You can't
they were
intimated.
They were being
You speak for you, Dennis. Yes or no?
Well, of course, I'm against hate language that she used. So yes, Sadiq Khan is right.
So what about the hate language used on the marches? And finally, Ben Habib.
Sadiq Khan is wrong. He's wrong on just about everything. He should keep his mouth shut and stay out of it.
All right, thank you very much, James Mathewson, former Labour Party spokesperson, Neil Parish, Conservative MP, Sadiq Khan, former Conservative MP, I was about to say Sadiq Khan, he's not here, Dennis McShane, and also Ben Habib. Thank you so much. Thank you for your thoughts. So let's see what viewers think of that as well. Don't forget, you can get in touch via the usual means. This is GB News on TV, online, and on digital radio. On the way, we'll continue with the Great British Debate this hour, and I'm asking, is Sadiq Khan right to blame Suella Braverman for the violence at the marches? You will hear the thoughts of my panel, Christine Hamilton and Danny Kelly. But first, let's get your latest news headlines with Aaron.
It's 4:32. I'm Aaron Armstrong in the GB Newsroom. The Home Secretary has condemned anti-Semitic behaviour during the Armistice Day demonstration in London. Hundreds of thousands of pro-Palestinian protesters marched peacefully through the capital yesterday, but the Met Police says it's actively investigating a number of possible cases of hate crime. Suella Braverman has described some chants and placards as sick, inflammatory and clearly criminal. She's called for further action. She also praised officers for their handling of the disorder after far-right counter-protesters clashed with police in an effort to confront the main march. 9 officers were injured. Police have confirmed the vast majority of the 145 arrests yesterday were counter-protesters. 7 have been charged with various offences. The King has led the nation, observing a 2-minute silence on Remembrance Day, honouring fallen soldiers. The Prince of Wales was among the senior royals to stand behind King Charles, the monarch wearing the uniform of the Marshal of the Royal Air Force. He laid a wreath similar to the one produced for King George VI. And people in Northern Ireland, England and parts of Wales are being warned to batten down the hatches as Storm Debbie approaches. Heavy rain and gale force winds up to 80 miles an hour are expected. Earlier this month, Storm Ciarán caused widespread flooding, and the yellow alerts will be in place from 3 a.m. tomorrow morning to 6 p.m. tomorrow evening. I'll be back with more in just under half an hour's time, or there's more on our website now, gbnews.com.
Who is it? We're here for the show. Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour with me, John Cleese. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie.
Second best.
You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these 3.
Ah!
No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays at 9 on GB News.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's, at drive time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Good afternoon, 38 minutes after 4 o'clock. If you've just tuned in, welcome on board. Don't forget as well, you can download the GB News app where you can check out all the programmes on the channel. You can check that out in there. It's totally free. I'm Nana Akua. Now it's time for the Great British Debate this hour, and I'm asking, is Sadiq Khan right to blame Suella Braverman for the violence at the marches? So we had loads of things going on there, didn't we? There was lots of people carrying different banners. There was lots of chanting from the river to the sea. And we also had the EDL who behaved in a not acceptable or appropriate manner. The police divided the crowd so that they would have the EDL on one side. They had a huge barricade, and then we had the pro-Palestinian marchers on the other side. But in the end, there was violence and aggression from both sides. And at the moment, they are trying to use imagery to work out who from the Palestinian side caused issues. And there were those arrests as well by some from the EDL or from the far right, supposedly. So let's see what my panel make of that. I'm joined by journalist and broadcaster Danny Kelly and author and broadcaster Christine Hamilton. All right, I'm going to start with you, Danny Kelly. What do you think?
Sadiq Khan's comments. There is evidence, and I've seen it online, where there were some goons singing towards the police, "You're not English anymore," or words to that effect. Now, that would, to me, that would sort of suggest that they had paid attention to Suella Braverman's comments about policing differently for one group of people and policing differently for another group of people. So has it emboldened, has it inflamed? I would say that it must have emboldened and inflamed, but I take you back to my earlier point. Yesterday was always going to kick off. It was always going to happen. Because what we're confusing now, and we need to differentiate between nationalism and far rights and patriotism. Now, there's a danger. Being patriotic is fine. The love of your country. Being a nationalist isn't that fine, because you think your culture is better and superior than other people's cultures, and you think that your country is better and superior than other people's countries. I would say I'm a patriot. I'm definitely not a nationalist. And yesterday, people descended, patriots descended, and nationalists descended. And unfortunately, it ended up in a cocktail of violence. But some of it, according to the social media videos I saw where people were singing to the old Bill, "You're not English anymore." So I would say that's a connection to her comments.
Christine Hamilton.
Well, I have two emotions about what happened over the weekend. One is anger at the way our very precious weekend. It's very rare that Armistice Day and Remembrance Sunday come together as one weekend. The way it's been hijacked, and we should be talking about the remembrance side of it all and the wonderful ceremony at the cenotaph and all that sort of thing, instead of which we're talking about hate marches. And there is no such thing as absolute freedom of speech. It always has to be balanced with other things. And the balance on this occasion was whether the right of Britain to continue with its annual celebrations, commemoration at the cenotaph, should trump the right of people to march for whatever reason. And I think Suella Braverman was absolutely right. There were plenty of people in that march. They knew who had organised the march. The march had been organised partially by Hamas people. So if you didn't have any support for Hamas, you would not go on that march. And unfortunately, there were a lot of what useful idiots they are. Stalin coined the term for people from America who used to go over and sympathise with the communists, etc. And he called them useful idiots, and he used them for their ends. And the Hamas are using people who, for the best will in the world, went out to march because they thought they were marching for peace. They weren't marching for peace. They were marching, and the size of that march demonstrated to Hamas that there are enough people with them. If that march hadn't taken place, and I don't think it should have done, any other day of the week and other weekends that they can march, if that hadn't taken place, we wouldn't have had the counter marches from the patriots, and we wouldn't have had any of this trouble, and we could have just had our normal remembrance commemoration, which is what it should have been. So I really so regret.
Do you know, I was so pleased. I'm going to diverge from you for a moment.
You do that.
Because I thought it should have taken place, and I'm glad that it took place after 11 o'clock. And let me qualify this, because at the moment, the people who are supporting the Palestinians, and we need to differentiate between the vile individuals supporting Hamas and the people who are supporting the end of the war. And there are a mixture of people in this.
Of course. Yeah. Well, not everyone can have the same view.
Correct. They have a legitimate argument that they need to put as much pressure on the Israeli government now not to delay it for this weekend,
but they've been putting pressure
now.
on every single weekend so far, and we know about it. It's not as if it's
I
something...
agree, but the war isn't stopping. The war is continuing. And so they would say, whether I agree with it or not, their argument would be, well, if we delay it, if we postpone it, then that is alleviating the pressure from the Israeli government. That's what they would say.
What about putting pressure on Hamas to release the hostages? That, to me, is the first thing that should come. And I take your point, but I still think it was outrageous. And I believe in free speech, etc. And, you know, people died so that those people could march.
But free speech is within a democracy. So the difference between free speech here and free speech in China is that you do not have a dictatorship telling you what you can and can't say. OK, so that's where you've got the divergence and the difference. Free speech within a democracy is where we, as a general public, vote on what is acceptable and what isn't acceptable now, and where the line is, and that's how it works. So we have a line as to which you don't cross, and some of those things, I think it was crossed in many ways. So that is the point. It's not, you know, people say, "Hey, you're supposed to be in freedom of speech." I'm saying, doesn't mean that you can say or do whatever. It means that within a democracy, it's not determined by a dictator as to what you can say. It's determined within the democracy as to what is acceptable, and that is what's happening.
It's not absolute. And Suella Braverman knew that the line was going to be crossed if that march took place, and it was.
But the thing is, I watched the 2 minutes at the Cenotaph. You could hear a pin drop.
Good.
No, I could hear helicopters.
Yes,
on
but
Saturday.
that would be...
I was sitting on the radio and I could hear like a buzzing, because
on Saturday...
you heard white noise.
Of course, they have to, otherwise the radio
there were
will
helicopters.
True,
Maybe not. I didn't hear them today.
I don't think that they can land and then take off in central London just to observe 2 minutes silence. But I understand your point. But I could hear a pin drop, which was met with great relief from myself. So what we managed to do successfully, forget about the fighting for a second, you had 150 to 300,000 people protesting, and you had the 2 minute silence immaculately observed. Now, I think that's almost a success.
I think it... Well, of course, the 2 minutes is a success, but my problem with this, though, is that march could have happened at another time, and in my view, it was deliberately provocative to sort of create this environment, which is what has happened. And if it were me and I were in charge, I would have absolutely not allowed it, and I would have found some law somewhere to make sure that it didn't happen on that weekend. And yes, we have freedom of speech, but we also expect our government to protect and keep the people of this country safe. And I think some of the people who weren't protected on, especially this weekend, would have been the Jewish people. And I'm kind of sick and tired of people blaming Suella for other people's actions.
Jews had to stay at home because they were frightened to go out. And that march, to me, was frankly for 2 fingers to our way of life, 2 fingers to our culture, 2 fingers to British values and British traditions. And
there was lots
never
of that.
have taken place.
There was lots of that on display. If you were wearing a poppy, again, I've seen it online.
Well, that's right.
People were approached and with great hostility. Why are you wearing poppies and all of this?
See, that's
they don't know why we're wearing poppies. They haven't absorbed any of our culture.
These were young Brits.
Right.
These were young Brits.
Well, but I think there's also an argument that young people don't really...
These were British Asian kids, Muslim kids.
Yeah, but... Well, listen,
should know about the poppies.
We will talk about that, because we've got loads to discuss, and that's actually in the next hour. We're going to discuss a subject pretty similar to that, but this show is nothing without you and your views. Let's welcome our great British voice, their opportunity to be on the show and tell us what they really think about the topics we're discussing. Where should we head over today? Shall we go to Kidderminster? Yeah, I missed my map.
Where is your map?
I don't know what's going on. John Reid, where are you? He's there in Kidderminster, apparently. Hi, John, do you miss the map as well? It's gone. Cutbacks, John. Cutbacks. Although it's already made, you can stick it in. Yeah. So listen, John, what do you think, then? What's your thoughts?
The map as well. Bring back the map. Let's get a campaign going.
Yeah, let's do it.
What TV News is great for is free speech, and that's why I do this when I do it. I love coming on here and talking and giving you my opinion. Do I have any time for Suella? None at all. Do I have any time for Sadiq? Not really. On this event, I don't think that Suella's comments were very proper, but did they incite violence? Not in my world, no. I don't think they did. I think it would have happened anyway. Whether she said nothing at all or whether she made some terrible speech, I don't think she's affected anything particularly. I don't think she's added anything to the debate. Don't think she's taken anything away. I think it would have happened because you've got a population now which is divided, and we've got a government that's divided. We've got a country that's divided. How are we going to put an end to it all? Who knows? General election, I suppose, but... yeah, bring back the map, and we'll sort it out.
We'll sort out the map. Listen, John Reid, always a pleasure. This is GB News. We're live on TV, online and on digital radio. That's a fabulous John read. We've got loads still to come on the show. I've got my wonderful outside guest. You want to find out who that is still to come. I'll be speaking to Israeli government spokesman Avi Hyman on the situation in Gaza as 4-hour humanitarian pauses have been agreed. But first, let's get some weather.
Hello there, I'm Jonathan Vautry, here with your GB News weather forecast provided by the Met Office. Storm Debbie has been named by Met Air and the Irish Weather Service and is expected to be picked up by the jet stream and powered towards Ireland and the UK as we head throughout tonight and into Monday. Potential for some disruptive weather, particularly for Northern Ireland, the Irish Sea coastal areas and across northern areas of England where severe gales are possible. For this evening, we see this band of rain pushing its way northwards into Scotland, but it's here Storm Debbie arriving in the southwest. Some very heavy rain pushing into England, Wales and then particularly Northern Ireland later on. Very persistent here. Some flooding is possible. A swathe of gales developing in the west as well. With all the cloud, the rain and the wind, it will be a milder night compared to last, but a touch of frost is still possible across rural areas of northern Scotland. A very unsettled start to the new working week and a very disruptive morning rush hour as well. Heavy rain pushing its way in, eventually reaching parts of Scotland. A swathe of severe gales, 80 mile an hour possible winds across coastal areas of northwest England, 55 to 60 mile an hour possible across the Pennines and other areas of northern England. It does turn brighter for central southern areas of England and Wales later on in the day. Temperatures around 15-16 degrees Celsius here, but still feeling a bit colder than that where you are exposed to the blustery winds. Into Tuesday, it's not as disruptive as Monday, but it is going to remain fairly unsettled. A mixture of sunshine and showers. Those showers could be heavy at times with some thunderstorms and hail in the mixture as well. And we hold on to the unsettled theme into the middle part and second half of the week as well, with more wet and windy weather on the way. Bye-bye.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
There's only 3 people you can trust in life. Your doctor, your lawyer, and your nana.
I'm not sure.
So join me, Nana Akua, at 3 p.m. every Saturday and Sunday, where we discuss the biggest topics of the weekend. Be ready for battle.
Could you be quiet? What is this?
It's my new teeth.
It's your new teeth.
I don't bite. Well, not without a good reason. Always honest, always fun. Every weekend at 3 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes & Co, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's, at Drive Time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christys, on GB News and GB News Radio.
So it's coming up to 54 minutes after 4 o'clock. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. I'm Nana Akua, and it's time now for World View. And joining me to talk about the developments in the Israel-Hamas conflict is the Israeli government spokesperson, Avi Hyman. Avi, good afternoon. Thank you for joining me. Avi, how successful has Israel's ground operations been?
Well, firstly, thank you very much for having me on, Nana. We're moving forward. We're moving forward with our mission, which is twofold. Firstly, to destroy the Hamas military operation, the Hamas government entirely, and obviously to free the 240 Israelis that were taken captive against all wars of law. They took, as you know, men, women, children, toddlers, and even babies. And our mission is plowing ahead. We've surrounded Gaza City. We're keeping the pressure up on Hamas. We're taking out a lot of Hamas targets, pinpointing Hamas, and doing our very best to avoid civilian casualties in a way that no army has likely done in the history of modern warfare.
Yeah.
But we have to keep going until we take care of this issue so that Hamas never again can perpetrate the likes of atrocities that we saw on October 7th, when they plowed through our borders, killing men, women, and children, killing children in front of their parents, parents in front of their children, beheading babies, opening fire on babies' cots. The people of Israel can no longer go on with a terrorist entity, an ISIS-like entity on our southern border. This is an existential threat that we need to deal with now, and we are dealing with it.
Now, of course, you've been a lot of pressure on Israel to have some sort of pause during the fighting, and those have been arranged now. How does that affect you militarily?
So there's been a lot of talk of the humanitarian pauses. I can tell you that even before that talk, humanitarian pauses were happening. For example, when 2 of our people were released by Hamas, and then another 2 were released by Hamas, there were pauses. Now, let me define a humanitarian pause for you. It's not a ceasefire. There won't be a ceasefire until Hamas is finished and until our hostages are released entirely, without without any preconditions. When we talk about pauses, there can be a 2-hour, 3-hour, 4-hour pause in a specific area so that we can enable civilians, Gazan civilians, to move out of the line of fire, which we've done. We've done for the last 3 weeks. We've called on Gazans to move south, and they have. Almost 1 million of them have in those humanitarian corridors. They've moved to the safer zone by the coast in the south because our war is with Hamas. We're going after Hamas, and we want to minimize civilian casualties. So, yeah, we can take a specific pause in a specific area while still keeping the pressure on Hamas everywhere else.
Now, of course, we heard that the Al-Shifa hospital was bombed. Can you sort of tell me categorically if it was Israel that bombed the hospital, or was it a backfire or something like that from Hamas or from Gaza itself?
What I can tell you categorically is that Israel does not target hospitals or humanitarian facilities of any kind. I can tell you also categorically that Hamas embeds themselves underneath hospitals, mosques, schools. They shoot from in and around UN and humanitarian facilities to try and draw fire from Israel. To the best of my knowledge, that was not an Israeli attack. We have explained pretty much from the beginning of the operation that Shifa hospital, the biggest hospital in Gaza, and this is a tragedy to even say, the biggest hospital in Gaza is where Hamas has their underground command and control center. They put it there for very good reason, because they know that we don't attack humanitarian facilities. So I want people to just think a little bit about the tunnels in Gaza. We're not talking about some bad guy's lair. We're talking about something the magnitude of the London Underground, a multi-layered underground world where they've hogged food, fuel, water, and obviously munitions to kill as many Jewish men, women, and children as they can. So now they are trying to center the conflicts around the Shiva hospital, where they are based. We have tried our very best to evacuate that hospital. We even called on the hospital's leadership to allow us to give them fuel, to allow us to take out the patients. And to our knowledge, from what we're hearing, Hamas is doing their very best, not only to keep our 250 Israelis hostage, but to keep the people of northern Gaza hostage. Because whereas my friends on the friends and family on the 7th of October put down their babies and their children and said to their spouses, we're going off to war, to fight a just war, an existential threat against our nation. We're going to war. Hamas, like cowards, ran underground, under their children, under their hospitals, under their schools, because they fight behind civilians while we fight on behalf of civilians.
And Avi, finally, because we're running out of time, I just want to get your view on all of the protests that you're seeing, the pro-Palestinian marches that are going on around the world. What are your thoughts on those?
Nana, it's a worrying day when Jews are scared to go into central London because of what's going on. I've seen people dressed up in balaclavas and masks with Hamas headbands on. I've seen Stars of David intertwined with swastikas. I mean, we ask people if they were with us when we were the victim, that they be with us when we're the victor. Chants of from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. Understand what that means. That means policide, the total eradication of the Jewish state, the one and only Jewish state, and it means genocide of the Jewish people. And I remind your viewers that Hamas's charter is very clear. First, they want to eradicate the Jewish state, and secondly, they want to eradicate Jews everywhere. So if I was a Jew walking the streets of London, I would be very, very scared at that and other chants which are directed not only at Israel, but at the Jewish community in England.
Avi, thank you so much for talking to me. That's Avi Hyman. He's a spokesperson for the Israeli government. He's live in Israel. Thank you so much. Well, this is GB News. We're live on TV, online and on digital radio. Quickly, briefly travelling over to America. We'll speak to the host of the Politics People podcast, Paul Dudridge. Paul, we're going to have to make this one brief because I've got to go to the news. I can't believe it. I was so busy talking to the Israeli spokesperson. But let's briefly talk with regard to the Democrats, what's going on there, the abortion issue, which has been credited with helping them to perform better than expected in this week's elections.
Yeah, there were elections this week. We've talked about it. It's going to sink the Republicans in 2024. Oh. As predicted on this channel by us, weeks and months, and we've talked about this for a year now. Democrats are going to be campaigning in 2024 on abortion, and they've just had a massive success this week as an indicator, a barometer of what they're capable of in 2024. The Republicans have absolutely shot themselves in the foot with this awful Roe v. Wade repealing. Yeah. So we've seen the results of that this week.
And briefly, Trump, he says that he's going to consider Tucker Carlson as his vice president. Is that a true thing or a false thing?
True thing. Listen, it's twofold, very, very quickly. He brought up Tucker Carlson, that he might consider him to be his VP running mate. The MAGA movement, the Make America Great Again movement, sees Tucker Carlson as its future leader, actually. Wow. So it's an important name check from Donald Trump.
Listen, Paul Dudridge, thank you. Succinct as ever. This is GB News. We're live on TV, online and digital radio. That was Paul Dudridge, host of the Politics People podcast. More to come. So good afternoon, this is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio for the next hour. Me and my panel will be taking on some of the big topics hitting the headlines right now. On the way, my mystery guest for Outside. I can't tell you anymore because I don't know who it is. No, I'm joking. Then the Great British Debate this hour. I'm asking, is Britain at risk of losing its national identity? But first, let's get your latest news with Aaron.
Very good evening to you. I'm Aaron Armstrong in the GB newsroom. The Home Secretary has condemned anti-Semitic behaviour during the Armistice Day demonstration in London. Hundreds of thousands of pro-Palestinian protesters marched peacefully through the capital yesterday, but the Met Police says it's actively investigating a number of possible cases of hate crime. Suella Braverman has described some chants and placards as sick, inflammatory and clearly criminal, and has called for further action. She also praised officers for their handling of disorder after right-wing counter-protesters who were trying to confront the rally clashed with police. The force, which arrested 145 people yesterday, have confirmed 7 have been charged with various offences. British Transport Police is also investigating a racially aggravated altercation at London Waterloo and has released the photos of 4 men it's trying to identify. Authorities also want to speak to a woman over an alleged anti-Semitic hate crime at Victoria Station. Meanwhile, the Home Secretary, who attended today's Remembrance service, is being blamed for stoking tensions ahead of the pro-Palestinian protests. During the week, Suella Braverman described the demonstrations as hate marches, and she questioned the integrity of the police for allowing yesterday's rally to go ahead. The Scottish First Minister, Humza Yousaf, is among the chorus of growing voices calling for her to go.
I'm afraid that the Home Secretary's position, in my view, is untenable. She should, in fact, not even be allowed to resign. She should just be sacked by the Prime Minister, because no Home Secretary should be fanning the flames of division. Quite the opposite.
However, the Defence Secretary, Grant Shapps, has defended his Cabinet colleague.
Job as Home Secretary is to make sure that, quite properly, that the powers exist and then the powers are then used within the operational independence of the police to make sure that marches and protests are properly policed, and where the laws have been broken, as they clearly have been in some cases, that those prosecutions take place. That is what a Home Secretary is there for. Now, I wouldn't have quite put it in her language. It's not the language I would have used, but the point still stands.
The King has led the nation, observing a 2-minute silence on Remembrance Day, honouring fallen soldiers. Well, the Prince of Wales was among the senior royals to stand behind King Charles. The monarch was wearing the uniform of the Marshal of the Royal Air Force. He then laid a wreath similar to the one produced for King George VI. The Prime Minister, a Labour leader and a number of former leaders were also at the cenotaph in central London with senior politicians and dignitaries. A man's been charged with the murder of a mother who was killed in front of her children in Manchester. Perseverance in Kube was found with a single stab wound to the chest in the early hours of Friday morning. She later died in hospital. 45-year-old Obert Moyo has been charged with possession of an offensive weapon, and he's due to appear in court tomorrow. Weather warnings have been issued for Northern Ireland, England and parts of Wales as Storm Debbie approaches. It's the 4th named storm of the season. Heavy rain and gale force winds up to 80 miles an hour are expected. Earlier this month, Storm Ciarán caused widespread flooding. The yellow alerts will be in place from 3 a.m. tomorrow morning until 6 o'clock in the evening. And Iceland is preparing for a volcanic eruption. The island's been hit by a series of earthquakes over the last few days, and authorities say there's evidence of magma spreading rapidly underground in the southwest. Now, thousands of residents have been evacuated from the town of Grindavik. One of Iceland's most popular attractions, the Blue Lagoon Spa, has also been forced to close. Well, this is GB News. We're live across the UK on TV, on digital radio and on your smart speaker too. Now it's back to Nana.
Good afternoon. It's just coming up to 7 minutes after 5 o'clock. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. I'm Nana Akua, and for the next hour, me and my panel will be taking on some of the big topics hitting the headlines right now. This show is all about opinion. It's mine, it's theirs, and of course it's yours. We'll be debating, discussing, and at times we will disagree, but no one will be cancelled. So joining me today, it's author and broadcaster Christine Hamilton, and also broadcaster and journalist Danny Kelly. Still to come, each Sunday at 5, I'm joined by a celebrity, a former MP, or someone who's had an incredibly interesting career to take a look at life after the job. We talk highs, lows and lessons learned and what comes next on the outside. And today, my celebrity rose to fame as one of the main stars as The Only Way is Essex. Yeah. From here, he appeared in reality shows involving dating, ghost hunting, yes, all the things, all the fun stuff, and even farming. He also made the headlines in 2019 after he started a campaign to make homophobia a criminal offence. He'll be joining me live in the studio in a couple of moments' time. Then for the Great British Debate this hour, I'm asking, is Britain at risk of losing its national identity? This week we've seen a pro-Palestine march take place on Armistice Day, a time seen as some in the country as one of the most solemn days. And I'm also asking, is Britain losing its identity? As ever, you can get in touch, email gbviews@gbnews.com or tweet me at gbnews. So each Sunday at 5, I'm joined by a celebrity, former MP, or someone who's had an extremely interesting career to take a look at life after the job. We talk highs, lows and lessons learned and what comes next on The Outside. Now, my next guest is a TV personality. Now, he shot to fame on The Only Way is Essex and has made guest appearances on I'm a Celebrity, Get Me Out of Here. He's also been a very active campaigner and began a petition to make homophobia a criminal offence, which is also spoken about in Parliament. Any guesses? Well, I'm joined now by Bobby Norris, radio and TV personality, an all-round entertainer. Thank you, Bobby.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be in the studio.
The first thing that jumps out at me, your teeth. They're so white, mate. Let's have a look. Oh, let's have a shot of them. Look at this. Look at those gnashes.
They're not God-given.
They're not? Really?
No. I know they look quite natural.
But it makes you look more tan, darling.
Exactly, babe.
They asked me if I wanted mine. I've got two front ones. They asked me if I wanted mine to be super white, and I thought, no, because I'm darker. They'll be so white, it'll be ridiculous.
You've got lovely teeth.
Thank you, Bobby, thank you. But let's start me off with you then. So you were in The Only Way is Essex.
Yeah.
Talk to me about how you came to do that particular show.
So back then, it's about 12 years ago I first started the show. And reality TV was in its infancy, really. So there was nothing that was an ongoing reality show, so you couldn't compare it to anything. And just on a night out, there was a producer. They just started filming. And there used to be what we call Towery Towers at Marble Arch at the time. And they went, oh, will you come into Towery Towers on Tuesday and have a meeting with us? So I went, yeah, didn't think much of it. Went in. And I think within about 10 days, I'd gone through all like this kind of process of seeing producers. I'd done pieces to camera. And I was on this TV show, and none of us really knew what to expect. None of us ever thought that it would have gone on for as long as it has.
Yeah, it did, didn't it?
And yeah, we couldn't compare it. There'd been Big Brother at the time, but people would go into a house for 9 weeks, come out, and then other people would go in. There was nothing that was kind of ongoing. And I think some people still now don't fully understand, like, the concept of how... Because everyone's like, how much is it?
What is the concept? What's going on? Because is it... I watch it and I think to myself, what is going on? Are they actually... Did they read the script beforehand and then you make up the scenarios? Or is this actually something that is real that you're actually enacting?
And I think that's why so many people get confused, because it's like a structured reality show in terms of we have to be told where to be. So when people... We used to call them, like, bumpings on the street, so you'd coincidentally pass someone in the street. But obviously the camera crew need to be like you know, like the cameras have to be set up, producers have to be there,
exactly.
You have to be mic'd. So that kind of thing, obviously, you're very aware when you're filming and when you're not filming, but you're never given a script. And as the years evolved, it was kind of more, I think, back in the day, like a fly-on-the-wall kind of documentary. And then reality TV has become such a beast of a thing now.
It's a bit like The Truman Show in a way, isn't it? They're sort of guiding you, but it's a sort of unreal reality, I suppose you're in. You're living in something
and it's kind of become more like a soapy kind of thing now, this many years on. But, yeah, I did 10 years there, and, an amazing decade.
It was a bit of a good run, actually.
Yeah.
Who would have thought it would have lasted that long? But it did. And I actually think it's an interesting evolution in TV to see it become that. And obviously a lot of stars are springboarded off the back of it, like you, and you're doing other things as well. I know recently you were campaigning to ensure that homophobia was a proper crime. Talk to me about why you decided to sort of push in that direction.
So for me, I think I started campaigning about 5 years ago, and no one really back then was speaking out about trolling. And I remember speaking to a producer. We used to get, like, phone calls, and they'd go, how are you? Like, that's how they'd kind of figure out what we was filming the next day or the following episode. And I remember being quite embarrassed about being trolled, which sounds silly to say out loud, but I was really embarrassed. And it was only ever really because of my sexuality, which is something I can't do anything about. You can abuse me for a million years. I'm not ever going to wake up a straight man.
But whose business is it anyway? I mean, like, why should... I'm not interested in that. And people... Why... I often wonder why some people who are gay say, oh, I've come out, and it's like, I'm not interested.
Yeah.
Just not interested, I don't want to know.
It shouldn't be a defining thing about someone. But that's all they could kind of abuse me for, really. And I remember being quite embarrassed about it, and I thought, I'm going to speak about it because I've always seen my job as I'm very fortunate to have a profile and to have a voice, and I think it's important to use that voice for good. So I spoke out about it, and I spoke to producers. I said, I'm going to speak about this on the show. I've started a campaign, which I then took to Downing Street, and I think there's been like 4 or 5 meetings since in Parliament. Because, I mean, I'm very aware in my job. Some people say you kind of sign up to it. But it's not just people in the public eye that do get trolled. And since I spoke about it, I get so many messages from parents, and some are just heartbreaking, like... people's kids that have taken their own lives because trolling can get that bad. So it isn't really just people that you see on TV or in the media that get trolled. And my thing was always, if I can save one person from taking their own life, why would I not do that? So the 5 years have been worth it, and I would do it for another 5 years until something's done. Because for me, the genie's out of the bottle, and I love social media. But there is a bit of a dark side to it. But I'm big enough and ugly enough to deal with it, do you know what I mean? I'm in my 30s, but I know 14-year-old Bobby would have struggled with it hugely. And I kind of feel sorry for kids today that you've got that pressure of social media now. Being a teenager's hard enough, do you know what I mean? But without that...
Now, obviously, with that, it sounds like you're getting involved in politics because you obviously you went to speak in Parliament about this. What are your thoughts on this weekend and some of the pro-Palestinian marches that you've seen? And
it's just unbelievable to see how this weekend's gone down. I think it's the timing as well. I think it's just so sad it's kind of been done when we should be thinking about our heroes that we've kind of lost and that are serving. You couldn't write it, do you know what I mean? Like, it's literally, I mean, and I don't claim to know the ins and outs of everything when it comes to politics. It's only been the last few years I've really started to become more interested in it. Because I think that's the thing as well, for us, it affects everyone. And when I was younger, I think, and a lot of people don't think, oh, it don't affect, but it's so, everyone should have an interest in politics because you need to, really. Especially the way things are at the moment. Just unbelievable.
Now, I noticed that you came in here with a cast on your leg. What happened?
So I was crossing the street, as you do, and I was hit by a motorbike.
Wow.
So I can't really go into too much, but yeah, it's...
It's been terrible. Did you go in the air and all that?
Yeah, I went up in the air, come down, landed on my head.
God.
So I've had better weeks, babe, I won't lie. But they tell me that I'm lucky. It could have been a lot worse. I think I'm quite fit and strong in how I've fallen. I could have done a lot more damage than I have. I mean, I have injured myself pretty badly. But... I weren't going to miss the show.
No,
do you know what I mean?
Do you know what you did to it?
Yes, I've fractured my leg, I've bruised my ribs. I've got a little bit of a list of what's gone on. But I think the nature of being hit at speed...
Oh, gosh. Frightening. Must be frightening. Must have been very frightening. I remember one guy who told me, and this isn't to laugh, but it's always to lighten the thought of it. He said he was on his motorbike, and he said, he crashed on his motorbike, and he said whilst he was in the air, he thought to himself, this is going to hurt. And then he landed, and it did hurt. Yeah. But it's interesting, he had time enough to think, this is going to hurt.
Because
in your head, you must have been thinking, oh, my God.
Yeah, because you literally didn't see it coming. It came out of anywhere. And as you're in the air, it's a really strange experience because I thought, I've been hit here. I knew I was no longer on the floor and I was flying through the air. I was like Peter Pan. And I thought, this ain't going to be good.
I don't want to laugh, but he did say like Peter Pan. You've got to laugh, though, haven't you? Otherwise you'll cry.
Otherwise you'll cry, exactly.
You'll cry otherwise. Now, talk to me about what you're doing now, because you've been taking part in... you're going to be taking part in a pantomime, but you're also on the radio, aren't you?
Yeah, so the last few years I've really concentrated on my presenting and hosting, and I absolutely love that. So I host a show on Food Bar Radio, and it's very celebrity-based, so I interview celebs, and it's right up my street. So I absolutely love that. And I've been there about 3 years now.
Who was your latest one that you've interviewed?
Who did I do last time? I do a lot of reality stars. So I had a lot of the people from Married at First Sight.
Married at First Sight. Did you get what's her name? Ellie. Has she done?
No, but I want her.
She's good, isn't she?
But yeah, I just absolutely.
I can't help
I'm in
with
the
that.
element with anything like that. Do you know what I mean?
Do you watch it after one after the other? I put them on and I watch one after the other. Even though I know I should be going to bed and it's like 3 o'clock in the morning, I'm thinking, you can watch this next one tomorrow. But somehow I have to watch
I love being able to binge things, and I always find it weird now. If you're watching something, I mean, it's very rare how we watch TV now, so it doesn't happen often. But if I have to wait a week for another episode, I can't do it. But I think that's what we used to have to do. Do you remember? We're so used to just binging, and like you say, it gets to 3 o'clock in the morning, you've smashed a box of Jaffa cakes or Maltesers, and I'm like, oh, what's next? What's next? Better go to bed. But yeah, love it, in the element. And then I've got Panto coming up, so start my rehearsal. Got my rehearsals coming up, so I'm hoping that there's no fly kicks or anything whilst I'm in this.
What are you going to be in Panto?
I'm Prince Charming. But it's an adult Panto, so I've seen a few of them and I really enjoy them. So it's going to be a little bit adult-natured.
And where will that be?
That's at Brentwood Theatre in January. So yeah, come and check it out. I don't know who Cinderella is yet, but
very good. Well, listen, Bobby, it's been lovely talking to you. If you were to give one word of a pearl of wisdom to anybody listening and watching, what would that be? Something that's helped you in your life, that has helped you push you forward.
I think it's definitely something that's come with age. I think in my 20s I cared a lot more, and in my teens what people thought about me. And I think when I turned 30, actually, you just care less. Do you know what I mean? Like, you become more confident. So for me, I've absolutely loved my 30s. And also, just be kind. It should go without being said, but be kind. The world could do with a bit of kindness.
Well, wait till you get to 50, you won't give a hoot. Bobby Norris, thank you so much for joining me. It's such a pleasure to meet you.
Thank you, babe.
That's lovely. That, of course, is radio and TV personality Bobby Norris. If you just tuned in, welcome. It's just coming up to 20 minutes after 5 o'clock. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. Still to come, the Great British Debate this hour. And I'm asking, is Britain at risk of losing its national identity? This week, we've seen pro-Palestine marches take place, one on Armistice Day, at times seen as by the country as one of the most solemn days on the calendar. So I'm asking, what do you think? Are we at risk of losing our identity? That's next.
Who is it? We're here for the show. Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour with me, John Cleese. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie. Second best. You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with you three.
Oh!
No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays at 9 on GB News.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's at Drive Time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Good afternoon, 24 minutes after 5 o'clock. This is GB News. We are the People's Channel. Don't forget as well, you can stream the show live on YouTube. I'm Nana Akua. It's time, though, for the Great British Debate this hour, and I'm asking, is Britain at risk of losing its national identity? Now, over the past 20 years, there have been a decline in the proportion of Britons who feel British, and this has led to calls for British identity to be redefined for the 21st century. After a mass pro-Palestinian demonstration took over London, many feel as if traditional British national identity is under threat in the wake of this weekend's widespread protests coinciding with Armistice Day. Are we witnessing a transformation in our cultural landscape wherein the significance of Britain's national events may no longer be able to be commemorated? And is Britain actually at risk of losing its national identity? Well, I'm joined now by academic and ethnographer Lisa Mackenzie, writer and broadcaster Candice Holdsworth, social policy analyst Dr Rakib Hassan, and former editor of the Labour List Peter Edwards. Well, I'm going to start with Dr Rakib Hassan. I'll start with you. Rakib, what are your thoughts? Of course, we had the Armistice Day, which was yesterday, as it appeared that it was somewhat disrespected in the fact that the pro-Palestinian march took place on that day. Do you feel that we're at risk of losing our national identity?
Well, I'd say I'm still pretty optimistic, Nana. If you look at a number of surveys across a variety of ethnic and religious groups, still the majority would say that their British identity is important to their personal identity. They do attach importance to their Britishness. What I would say, though, is that there's no room for complacency. I've talked a great deal about the threat of racial identity politics. In more recent times, I do think that we've seen tribal religious identity politics rear its ugly head. So I think that what we need to do is really double down, make sure that we're able to cultivate a civic national identity that a variety of people can take pride in, and really work against that identitarianism that threatens to stretch our social fabric.
OK. Peter Edwards.
Well, I'm really glad Remembrance Day commemorations could go ahead as planned, but there's no one version of British identity. It's been in constant flux for centuries, and even today, some people would call themselves English first, some British, some Scottish would call themselves Scottish first, particularly if they want independent Scotland. So I think it's not just there are several versions of it today, but there have been too many versions even to count over decades, and it will always change depending on everything. Your race, your class, your view of the country, your view of Europe and the world. So I think we've got to embrace the fact we've all got definitions of it, and we're allowed to have those definitions and not all be the same.
Is that Candice there in the middle there? Candice Holdsworth, writer and broadcaster. Candice.
Yeah, some very interesting points. I mean, I think for me, I feel like we're going through a sort of period of crisis, historical crisis. We're in a very unstable world and in an anxious time. And a lot of what you hear people saying is, I don't recognize this country anymore. What's happened to my country? And I think a lot of that is to do with the loss of faith in institutions. I mean, you see this week, all the debates that went on over so-called two-tier policing. You know, people don't trust the police. People don't have this sort of, you know, unified view of what the role of the police is. You see it in banking, for instance. People don't think banking is a neutral service. They think it's been politicized. Even, you know, you go further back with education, people feel that that's even become a culture war. I don't think it's specific to Britain, though. I think it's going on all across the Western world. You even look at America. Maybe America's even more divided than we are politically. So it's an interesting question whether we're losing our identity. I don't know if we're losing our identity, but I think we're definitely going through some sort of period of unraveling.
So in your view, Candice, what would you describe as being sort of British in terms of your thoughts on it?
That's a really interesting question. So for me, I mean, I'm a dual national and I have been since birth. So, you know, my British identity is sort of unique in some ways. I mean, I have my British identity and then I have my South African identity. And I've always felt like the two came together very nicely. And, you know, there'll be other people with other identities. You know, maybe they'll have an Indian identity and a British identity, or a Jewish identity and a British identity. And I think that these things are normally fine. I think really the divides we're seeing right now, they're more of a politics. That's what I think is dividing the country right now. There is identity politics coming into it, like Rakib said, and that's sort of complicating things, but that is part of this period of instability that we're in.
But Rakib, I'm sort of seeing it as being British in a sense, that all these things that people who are British treasure. So some of the great things, like maybe some of the religion within this country, which is generally a Christian country, which is one of the things that identifies this country as this country and part of the British identity. But also big events and certain days that sort of, again, make, you know, the King comes along and does a speech, we all talk, and it becomes something that we all feel unified by. Do you feel that there are factors that are happening now that are creating a situation where it's sort of dissolving what it means to be British?
Well, I think that Peter made a really good point, that people relate to their sense of Britishness in a variety of ways. And I actually think as long as you have a sort of umbrella of shared values, I'd talk about equality of opportunity, respect for the rule of law, appreciation of democratic choice. But then under that, you have people who relate to Britishness in a variety of ways. I'll give my own example. I think naturally my ethnic, racial and religious background does inform why I'm proud to be British. I think Britain is a world leader when it comes to providing anti-discrimination protections, for example, on the grounds of race, ethnicity and religion. I have a king that has previously talked about Muslim contributions to the European Renaissance. He's extolled the virtues of Islamic finance. He's even talked up Islam's emphasis on environmental sustainability. So you can see there, when I see the king give those kind of speeches, it almost consolidates my sense of British identity. Now, it might not mean so much to fellow citizens who might have a different background. So my point is we should have those shared values, that sense of common purpose, mutual obligations. We should also be quite flexible in terms of how people interact and how they feel British.
Well, Peter, final one to you then. Do you think that mass immigration has been one of the big factors that has kind of changed the landscape of everything, and why some people might feel that Britishness is sort of becoming something of you know, just dissolving and disappearing?
I think immigration has generally been a good thing. We have to remember a vast number of immigrants come here to work, but I also come back to this starting point that the state of British identity has been in constant flux. And, you know, 25 years ago, John Major had this image of warm beer and nuns cycling to Evensong. Even at the time, that was seen as a bit twee and simplistic. There are British identities, but I think a weekend like this weekend, Remembrance Sunday, reminds us of the diversity of the contribution of people from all walks of life. And the army doesn't get everything right, but the army does recruit from people from all walks of life. And I think we all make a contribution. I think we can enjoy that diversity rather than trying to pin it down to one single identity and then perhaps disagree over it.
All right. Well, thank you for that. Candice Holdworth, thank you so much. So in your view, then, do you think we're at risk of losing our national identity? In your view, yes or no?
I don't think we're at risk of losing it. I think it's changing. I think we're going through a very difficult period. We're going through a period of crisis. I mean, even you think about...
So this is a yes or no? I'll go to the news, Candice, sorry.
Yes or no?
Peter Edwards, yes or no?
No, I don't think we are.
No, she says no. Peter Edwards.
There is no single British identity, and there never has been. It changes all the time.
Rakib, yes or no?
No, we'll always have a robust civic British identity, and it will live on for a very, very long time.
Lovely. Thank you, Candice, Rakib, and also Peter Edwards. Lovely to talk to you guys. To you all, in fact. Right, it's just coming up to 33 minutes after 5 o'clock. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. Coming up, we'll continue with the Great British Debate this hour. I'm asking, is Britain at risk of losing its national identity? You will hear the thoughts of my panel, Christine Hamilton and also Danny Kelly. But first, let's get your latest news with Aaron.
It's 5:32. Good evening. I'm Aaron Armstrong in the GB newsroom. The Home Secretary has condemned anti-Semitic behaviour during the Armistice Day demonstration in London. Hundreds of thousands of pro-Palestinian protesters marched peacefully through the capital yesterday. The Met Police, though, says it's actively investigating a number of possible cases of hate crime. Suella Braverman's described some chants and placards as sick, inflammatory and clearly criminal, and has called for further action. She also praised officers for their handling of the disorder after right-wing counter-protesters who were trying to confront the rally clashed with police. The force, which arrested 145 people yesterday, confirmed 7 have been charged with various offences. The Kings led the nation, observing a 2-minute silence on Remembrance Day, honouring fallen soldiers. The Prince of Wales was among the senior royals to stand behind King Charles, who was wearing the uniform of the Marshal of the Royal Air Force. He then laid a wreath similar to the one produced for King George VI. And people in Northern Ireland, England and parts of Wales are being warned to batten down the hatches as Storm Debbie approaches. Heavy rain and gale-force winds of up to 80 miles an hour are expected. It comes as some parts of the country are still recovering from the effects of Storm Ciarán. Weather alerts will be in place from 3 a.m. tomorrow morning to 6 p.m. in the evening. That's it for the moment. More on our website, as always, gbnews.com.
So, coming up, should WhatsApp be banned from politics this week? Hamza Yousaf has been accused of misleading Parliament over WhatsApp messages. And we also heard of a time in British politics, particularly during COVID, when ministers were governed by WhatsApp. And, of course, we saw the leaked WhatsApp files, which was all a bit... So today I'm going to be asking in my mini-debate, should WhatsApp be banned from politics? But up next, it's time for the Great British Debate this hour. I'm asking, is Britain at risk of losing its national identity? That's on the way next.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
There's only 3 people you can trust in life. Your doctor, your lawyer and your nana.
I'm not sure.
So join me, Nana Akua, at 3 p.m. every Saturday and Sunday, where we discuss the biggest topics of the weekend. Be ready for battle. Could you be quiet? What is this?
It's my new teeth.
It's your new teeth. I don't bite. Well, not without a good reason. Always honest, always fun. Every weekend at 3 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
every Sunday from 11. Join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's at Drive Time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
Good afternoon. It's just coming up to 39 minutes after 5 o'clock. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. I've been asking you whether you think that Britain is at risk of losing its national identity. Lots of you have been getting in touch. Rodder says, you're asking, are we losing our identity? It's too late. It's done. Dyson says, we are not losing our identity. We're being denied our identity. And Egor says, Britain is losing their identity because governments are weak and don't stand up for British values anymore. Anybody can stamp our monuments, damage our pictures, galleries, drape our country's flags in our streets and kick policemen or their country's flags. I get it. And a lot of people have been talking about it. Well, let's welcome back to my panel to discuss. I've been asking, are Britain at risk of losing our national identity? So in the wake of all this weekend's widespread protests coinciding with Armistice Day, are we witnessing the transformation of our cultural landscape wherein the significance of Britain's national events may no longer be able to be commemorated? Well, let's see what my panel make of that. I'm joined by journalist and broadcaster Danny Kelly and author and broadcaster Christine Hamilton. I'm going to start with you, Danny Kelly.
I think if you become less British as a population, you're going to have your British identity diluted and changed. Now, London, and I can say this coming as an outsider, but London is a very different place to how it was when I came down as a teenager 30 years ago. You know, you walk down a street in London and you're probably going to hear a different language spoken to English. Now, when mass immigration occurs, then you are going to change your identity. That is a natural occurrence. Now, I would say that regionally, there'll be areas of England, regionally, where a British identity is different to a Londoner's British identity, if that sort of makes sense. You go to rural Cumbria, they will have a British identity based on values and social structures and social beliefs different to, say, a Londoner now.
Well, let's pin it down on things like Armistice Day, which was always a day that, in my calendar, I've never, ever known for there to be protests and marches and things for something else in another land altogether, which is not that we shouldn't be doing that. Whatever you want to do is fine, but there are sacred days. I mean, in other countries, certain things will not be allowed. So if you go to somewhere like Dubai or whatever identity, even if you have come from somewhere else or something has changed, they stick with you. Must wear the coverings and so on and so forth. No alcohol, this and that on the streets and so on and so forth. Yet we seem to be liberal and losing all the things that we hold dear. I'm just wondering what your perspective is on that.
Well, that's a great observation. And if we're talking about religion, like, for example, Islam, people who are devout Muslims will prioritise their religion over, for example, a British identity. And we saw that yesterday on the streets of London, where, although there were non-Muslims, there were plenty of white, and I'm going to say Christians, I would guess. But what we saw yesterday was a religion superseding what is sacrosanct for the vast majority of Brits, no matter what colour or matter what religion you are.
Well, because it doesn't matter where you come from. I'm black, I assimilate to the British identity. I was born in Newcastle, so I'm a Geordie, but ultimately, you know, I could have assimilated to a more African culture because of my parents, but they assimilated to a British culture, and that became their identity. Christine?
Well, we're an incredibly tolerant society, and yesterday proved that. And too many people in this country, you hit the nail on the head, they don't owe their allegiance to this country or to the British flag. They owe their allegiance to the country from whence they came, or the country from where their parents came, or the religion to which they belong. And definitely Britishness whatever that means, well, we all know what that means, is being watered down, and it starts in London. Do you know over 50% of the people living in London, Greater London, so over 50% were not born in this country? Now, if that...
I can believe that.
And by 2050, we will have 13 million Muslims in this country. Now, we are not a Muslim country, so why are we going to have 13 million? That's an enormous number.
But I mean, we might end up being a Muslim country if that is the case.
Yes, indeed we might. I mean, you don't, as you say, rural country. I live in rural Wiltshire, and no, the British way of life there is alive and well and doesn't really get interrupted unless you happen to watch the television. Fatal. But elsewhere, in big cities, Bradford, Birmingham, etc., the Muslim population is enormous, and it totally changes the way of life. But you know, if people come to this country, they should accept our way of life, our values, and they shouldn't try and impose theirs onto us.
But even, say, in the Muslim populations in other places around the country, they will still acknowledge things like Christmas and all the things that we hold dear in this country. And up till now, we haven't seen somebody, which, in my view, which I think is being very, very provocative by taking on a day that's meant to be commemorating our armed forces and our service personnel by doing something like that. So I don't, you know, I think a lot of people who are Muslim or whatever still love Christmas and still love all the things that we hold dear. Yeah. So I'm not so sure whether that's sort of the angle I mean. What I'm really saying is that we can have all of those things, but we shouldn't lose what is dear to this country, and I feel that that seems to be happening.
No, absolutely, and I can't understand how anybody who believes in British values would go on that march yesterday if they weren't marching towards the cenotaph with the right intention, because you just don't do it. If you're British, you don't do that. It's our British Day where we honour our dead. It isn't a day when we do other things.
Well, a fly in the ointment there would be that one of the British great values is one of fair play.
Yes, of course.
Isn't
free
it?
speech, tolerance.
But going back to my fair play, they would argue, this isn't necessarily my opinion, but they would argue that one of the great British identity factors is fair play, and they are acting on behalf of the people of Gaza.
Release the hostages. Once they release the hostages, then I think people can start talking about other things. But while Hamas are holding those hostages, Israel has no choice, to go back to the elephant in the room, has no choice but to continue to defend themselves and try and destroy Hamas. Otherwise, it will happen again.
Well, I was going to say as well, a lot of the young people, like we're talking about Armistice Day and Remembrance Sunday, but a lot of young people don't even think about that now. Right. So we're getting to a point where, you know, it's coming up to a century, and those who have who were alive at that time, most of them have passed away, and this is becoming something that we're forgetting. Yet we remember the slave trade how many hundreds of years ago, and this and that. So we keep those things up, but, you know, we're destroying our own monuments, you know, within universities, we're doing this, that and the other, chucking things in the river.
Forgive me. I think there was a poll out suggesting that adolescents and teenagers aren't even aware of the significance of the poppy, aren't even aware of the First World War, the Second World War, and they just see it as some sort of embroidery.
That is a grotesque failure of our education system, because every child, they should be taught at home, which is a parent's fault if they're not, but they should also be taught in schools. It's part of our history. It might be 100 years ago, but that's the very recent past. They will have grandparents who were involved. People should be taught it. It's a scandal if anybody doesn't know what the poppy is.
So what do you think then? Do you think, Christine, that we're at risk of losing our national identity?
Yes, I do. I seriously do. It's not, you know, I'm 74. The difference in this country from when I was growing up and now is profound. So add on another 50 years and goodness knows how much.
I think, generally speaking, the identity of a big city like London is night and day different compared to certain parts of Cumbria, Warwickshire, the West Midlands.
But you can still have all that and embrace the things that are British.
Yeah, but if you walk down a typical London street, you are less likely to hear the English language spoken.
But a lot of the time in those places that you speak, say for London, for example, London, people come here because they love the Britishness of it and will celebrate it. So, you know, all the royal family and things like that, people come here because they have gravitated to it. So I hear what you're saying, but that's one of the draws of this country.
Of course it is, but then you get some people who come to this country and point at the Buckingham Palace balcony and say, why is it so white?
But it's not. I mean, but it's not even. But it's not even necessarily the people of colour or whatever they're coming. Because as you pointed out, Danny, a lot of young people are not embracing things that are our national traditions and our national days. Like as you said, a lot of people don't know the significance of the poppy, and that's probably young white British people.
Very much so.
So that's why I asked the question, because it is a broad brush and it does cover all creeds and colours. But it shows nothing without you.
Any teacher who's listening, make sure every child in your class tomorrow morning knows about the poppy, and if they don't, Tell them.
Yeah, or get them a scarf like Christine's.
Yes, British Legion website.
People will ask questions. Right, like, what the hell you got on? Right, let's welcome our great British voices. This is your opportunity to be on the show and tell us what you really think about the topics we're discussing today. I've got three of you. I'm going to start with David Barr, who's in Watford. David, is Britain at risk of losing its national identity?
Yes, Nana. Unfortunately, it's been going on for many, many years. It starts with the liberal intelligentsia who want to apologise for everything that Britain's ever stood for, right or wrong, that throws out the history. We're not allowed, they're not being taught World War II in schools. If you remove the history and only allow people to have what they want, we have no identity. We are a country where we've always welcomed people. My mother came from Germany. They learned English. They weren't British. They weren't German. So we've got to bring that back, where we have to appreciate and understand what the history of the past was and not apologise for it, because it's made who we are.
OK. Well, let's go. Thank you for that, David. Let's go to Philip Hoy. He's there in Hertfordshire. Philip, what do you think?
Hi, Nana. Well, let's look at the last couple of years. We've been importing an army of Islam into this country. I'm not trying to be provocative, but it's a fact of life. And you have to accept the fact that one of the tenets of Islam is to convert people to their way of thinking and to their religion. And as your other correspondent just said, something about 30% or 30 million Muslims in a few years' time. It's lovely to have immigrants.
13.
13, I'm sorry. But nevertheless, it's nice to have immigration. I've got nothing wrong with that. But let's have people who aren't trying to change this country. If they want to come to this country because it's such a good country, super, lovely, integrate into our country. We will welcome you. But don't come in and expect to change up the British as they are and only have their methods, only have their views. Anything we say is wrong. And, you know, I'm sorry, because I've spent a lot of time in the Middle East. I know an awful lot about it. And this thing about, oh, it's a religion of peace. No, I'm sorry, it isn't. I'm sure there's some very peaceful ones. But I have to say, yesterday's march, the Palestinians on there had one view, which is to get rid of the Jews.
Well, that's no, but that's
the
not
other people.
Hold on. Stop. Sorry, hold. That's not necessarily fair.
Sorry,
no, let me finish. Yeah. Stop. Right there. Sorry, hang on. Yeah, that's not fair to say that, because there are lots of people on there who have many different views, so you can't really say that. But I hear what you're saying. But again, remember, you could say the same thing about Christianity, that people may want to convert. We want to convert people to Christianity as well. So it works both ways with regard to that. But even if you are somebody who's Muslim, many of my friends who are Muslim will still embrace British traditions, and that is the point I'm making. Right, lastly, I want to hear from Adrian. He's there in Shropshire. Adrian.
Hi, Nana, and thank you for having me on your show yet again. It's very, very kind of you, and it's lovely to be here. Yes, of course, our identity is unfortunately changing. And it has been for many years. I look back to a degree to history. My cousin was one of two officers, along with General Wyville, who selected the body of the unknown warrior to bring back to Westminster Abbey. My grandfather was killed in the Second War.
Adrian, you've only got about 20 seconds left. So what do you think then? Are we at risk?
But I'm saying they fought for freedoms, and with freedom comes responsibility. And unfortunately, responsibility in our society seems to have gone AWOL. It's all very well saying that, yes, we can express our feelings and what we want to do, but if it is done in an irresponsible way, that actually...
OK, no, I'm going to have to stop you there. Sorry, Adrian, but you've just gone on too long. Adrian Jell in Shropshire, thank you very much. Philip Hoy and David Barr, lovely to talk to you both. We've been talking for hours. Right, briefly, a story that caught my eye is going to be very brief. Is it time to ban WhatsApp from politics? The First Minister of Scotland, Humphrey Youssef, has been accused of misleading Parliament after admitting that the UK COVID-19 inquiry asked the Scottish Government for WhatsApp messages months ago, coupled with the stunning revelations of the language that came out of the WhatsApp from Dominic Cummings and blah, blah, blah. So, Christine and Danny, is it time to just take this out of politics, because it wasn't there before, and just have official methods and measures for measuring what has been done?
But you can't. You'll never stop people WhatsApping. If you and I want to WhatsApp privately about this programme, who's to stop us?
But should we take it out? Take it out, though.
You can't stop them. WhatsApp.
No,
is
I didn't
there.
say stop them, but should it be taken out of the equation when it comes to these decisions?
Oh, I see what you mean. Not count whatever was said on WhatsApp.
Yeah, I mean, it's WhatsApp.
Well, so far, all that's been said on WhatsApp is very unacceptable language.
Just
So possibly yes.
Danny, briefly,
Okay,
5 seconds.
dead quick. When you write something, most of the time the context is missing, and that's what happens with WhatsApp.
With WhatsApp, yes.
All right, well, listen, let's move on quickly to Supplement Sunday, part of the show where we bring out some of the other news stories that have been on. So let's go to Danny first. You've got about 30 seconds, Danny.
Because I'm happy. OK, struggling prison spends 10 grand to teach inmates how to click fingers and stamp feet to songs like Pharrell Williams' Happy so that they can manage their anger. And this is HMP Dartmoor, 9,600 quid. So they get all the prisoners together. Yeah, 9,600. They get all the prisoners together and they get a music teacher, an anger therapist guy in the room, and all of a sudden, because they're clicking the fingers, they're not going to shiv anyone in the shower.
Christine.
Oh, golly, right. Well, this is the most... Apparently, in 2024, next year, more people are expected to vote in elections than ever since records began in the 1960s. There are going to be national ballots in the UK, the USA, India, South Africa, the European Union, etc. 2 billion people will be eligible to vote, which is about two-thirds of the democratic world.
Well, listen, and finally, my supplement, there we go. Christmas and Easter have apparently been excluded from the National Trust inclusion calendar. Meanwhile, Diwali, Eid and Ramadan feature in the Heritage Group inclusive in the calendar. What do you think? Good or bad?
Is Britain changing? I mean, dear God, that's the National Trust.
British identity is celebrating Christmas. Shame on you.
Yes, I resigned years
on
ago.
today's show, I've been asking, is Sadiq Khan right to blame Swallow Braverman for the violence of the marches? 85% of you say yes, and 15% of you say no. So is he wrong to blame her? Yes, he's wrong. Thank you very much, Danny.
Thank you, Nana. Great to see you.
Lovely to have you on here.
Fabulous,
And Christine
as
Hamilton,
always.
lovely to have you as well.
Thank you. See you next week.
And thank you to you at home for your company. I look forward to seeing you same time, same place, 3 o'clock on Saturday. Enjoy. Oh!
Hello there, good evening. I'm Jonathan Vautry here, your GB News weather forecast provided by the Met Office. Many of us will be waking up to a very unsettled start to the new working week, and that is due to Storm Debbie. This area of low pressure that is very quickly going to deepen overnight and into tomorrow, producing some very strong winds, particularly directly on the southern flank of that for northern areas of England, coastal areas of the Irish Sea. Throughout this evening, we do have one band of rain sweeping its way across Scotland, but it's this rain in the southwest that is associated with Storm Debbie. Some very heavy pulses for England, Wales and into Northern Ireland, where it could be very persistent. Some localised flooding is possible during the early hours of Monday morning. Temperatures around 7 to 9 degrees Celsius for most of us, but some patchy frost is possible across the very far north of Scotland. But a very disruptive morning rush hour period for a lot of us. Some very strong winds, severe gales up to 80 miles per hour along coastal areas of the Irish Sea. Very blustery over the Pennines and northern areas of England as well. The rain sweeps its way up into eastern areas of Scotland, where again it could be heavy and produce some localised flooding in places. Some brighter spells for southern areas of England, Wales and into Northern Ireland later on in the afternoon, but it is still going to be a very windy day here nonetheless. Temperatures between 9 and 15 degrees Celsius. Tuesday looks less disruptive than Monday, but it is still going to be on the unsettled side with a mixture of showers in there, some of those heavy with thunderstorms and hail as well. A lot of cloud for northern England into Scotland, but Northern Ireland, southern areas of England and Wales may see some sunshine in between some of those showers as well. Remaining unsettled into the second half of the week as well with further wet and windy weather. Bye-bye.
Who is it? We're here for the show. Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour with me, John Cleese. I was married to a therapist. And you survived? I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie. Second best. You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like? I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these three. Oh! No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays at 9 on GB News.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute? Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christys, at drive time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christys, on GB News and GB News Radio.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you. Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months. That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Very good evening to you. I'm Aaron Armstrong in the GB Newsroom. The Home Secretary's condemned anti-Semitic behaviour during the Armistice Day demonstration in London. Hundreds of thousands of pro-Palestinian protesters marched peacefully through the capital yesterday, but the Met Police says it's actively investigating a number of possible cases of hate crime. Suella Braverman described some chants and placards as sick, inflammatory and clearly criminal, and she's called for further action. She's also praised officers for their handling of the disorder after right-wing counter-protesters